The sun was setting over the courthouse, casting a golden glow over the steps as Judge Nathaniel Harris prepared for what he thought would be a routine day. The courtroom was filled with the usual mix of lawyers, reporters, and spectators, all waiting for the cases to unfold. But none of them were prepared for what was about to happen. As the case called to order, a wave of murmurs rippled through the room. The defendant, Elon Musk. The courtroom grew quieter, and the reporters' pens hovered, waiting for the first words of this highly anticipated moment. Musk stood at the front, hands clasped behind his back, a calm expression on his face. He was dressed in a casual blazer, looking more like a tech visionary than someone facing a fine for a minor regulatory violation. In fact, many wondered how a man like Musk, known for his bold moves and revolutionary ideas, would handle a simple court appearance. Judge Harris, who had built a reputation for being tough but fair, looked down at his desk, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Musk," he said, his voice even, "you are here today for a violation of regulations during a recent SpaceX launch. A technical violation, yes, but still one that must be addressed. I hereby fine you $250,000 for failure to follow established protocol. Do you have anything to say?" A slight smile crept across Musk's face. It wasn't arrogance, no, it was something deeper, something more calculating. He took a moment before responding, his voice soft but clear. "Your Honor, I believe this fine is based on an incorrect interpretation of the law. If you look at the precedent set by Case 1989, Federal Aviation Administration versus Orbital Dynamics, you'll see that the regulations in question were applied incorrectly." The room froze. Judge Harris's eyebrows shot up. "Are you suggesting I'm wrong about the fine, Mr. Musk?" Musk didn't flinch. "Not suggesting, Your Honor. I'm stating it outright. I believe this fine is not just unwarranted but also unwise. The law itself needs to adapt to the changes brought about by new technology. Space travel is evolving, and so should the regulatory framework." The courtroom was silent for a long moment, the tension hanging thick in the air. Harris leaned forward, his sharp gaze now focused on Musk. "Mr. Musk, you seem quite confident in your understanding of the law. Tell me, do you consider yourself a legal expert?" Musk's smile deepened, almost as if he were enjoying the challenge. "I know enough to know that the law often lags behind innovation. But if it's all right with you, Your Honor, I'd like to present my case in full." Judge Harris, known for his strict adherence to protocol, seemed to hesitate. His instinct was to dismiss the boldness of Musk's claim, but something about the way Musk spoke made him think twice. There was an edge to it, an undercurrent of confidence, almost as if Musk had anticipated this moment for years. "Well, Mr. Musk," Harris said, his tone shifting to one of begrudging curiosity, "it appears you are prepared. Let's hear your argument." The courtroom buzzed with whispers as Musk's words hung in the air. Everyone was wondering, could Elon Musk be more than just a business mogul? Could he actually be a legal genius? As Judge Harris opened the floor to Musk's defense, one thought kept repeating in the minds of those in the courtroom: this wasn't going to be just another case. It was about to become something much bigger. Elon Musk had never been one to follow conventional paths. From the moment he was born in Pretoria, South Africa, to a Canadian mother and a South African father, Musk had been destined to break boundaries. His childhood was far from ordinary. Raised by a mother who was an author and dietitian and a father who was an engineer and entrepreneur, young Elon was exposed to a blend of creativity and logic early on. It wasn't the ideal family setup. His parents eventually divorced when he was 10, leaving him to navigate his own world. But even then, Musk's mind was already working at a different level. At the age of 12, he sold his first software, an early version of a game he created called Blaster, inspired by the arcade games he loved. It wasn't much, a small profit of $500, but it ignited something in him. He realized that with enough knowledge and determination, he could create and sell things that would reach far beyond his small town. He was no longer just a boy playing games, he was a creator, a builder. His teenage years were marked by deep introspection and isolation. Musk was often bullied, the awkward, brilliant kid who spent most of his time reading books on science, technology, and philosophy. But rather than retreating into despair, he used the isolation to fuel his ambitions. By 17, Musk left South Africa to attend Queen's University in Canada, and later transferred to the University of Pennsylvania in the United States, where he earned degrees in both physics and economics. His time at Penn marked the beginning of his bold ambitions. Musk didn't just want to make money, he wanted to change the world. He dreamt of space exploration, sustainable energy, and transforming the way humanity interacted with technology. His first major entrepreneurial venture came after he dropped out of Stanford University after just 2 days, choosing instead to dive into the burgeoning internet boom. He co-founded Zip2, an online city guide, and sold it for nearly $300 million. But that was just the beginning. With his newfound wealth, Musk founded X.com, an online payment company, which eventually became PayPal. The sale of PayPal to eBay for $1.5 billion made Musk a billionaire at the age of 31. But money, for Musk, was never the end goal. It was simply the means to fund his real passions: space travel, electric vehicles, and sustainable energy. SpaceX was born from Musk's desire to make humanity a multiplanetary species. He wasn't interested in just making a profit, he was obsessed with space. So, in 2002, he founded SpaceX, with the long-term goal of reducing the cost of space travel and ultimately colonizing Mars. The road was anything but easy. SpaceX faced multiple failures, with rockets exploding during test flights and Musk being labeled a madman by many in the aerospace industry. But Musk wasn't one to give up. In 2008, SpaceX became the first privately funded company to successfully launch a liquid-fueled rocket into orbit. This was just the beginning. Meanwhile, Tesla Motors, which Musk took control of in 2004, faced similar odds. The electric car market was barely a blip on the radar, and many critics doubted that a startup like Tesla could compete with giants like General Motors and Ford. But Musk persisted, pouring his time, money, and energy into creating vehicles that were not just sustainable but also innovative and desirable. Tesla's Model S, which launched in 2012, would go on to revolutionize the electric vehicle market, making Tesla one of the most valuable companies in the world. As the years went on, Musk continued to take on new ventures, from Neuralink to The Boring Company. But despite his success, Musk remained a figure of controversy. His unfiltered tweets, frequent clashes with the media, and his willingness to challenge established norms made him a lightning rod for both admiration and criticism. But now, here in this courtroom, Musk wasn't the CEO of Tesla or the founder of SpaceX. He wasn't the enigmatic billionaire who launched his own car into space. He was just a man facing a fine for a technical violation, a small blemish in the eyes of the public. Yet, as he stood before Judge Harris, there was a sense of unease in the air. The people in the courtroom didn't yet realize it, but this case, this seemingly minor violation, would soon become a turning point in the larger narrative of Musk's life. As Musk spoke, his calm demeanor hid the years of struggle, triumph, and failure that had defined his journey. The courtroom wasn't just a place to settle a legal matter, it was yet another arena where he would fight for what he believed in. To Musk, this fine wasn't just about the fine itself, it was about proving that even the smallest detail mattered in the grand scheme of reshaping the future. There was a quiet intensity in Musk's eyes as he stood there. He wasn't just presenting his case, he was presenting his worldview. In his mind, every regulation, every rule, every law was a construct that could be improved upon. He had done it before with rockets, electric cars, and artificial intelligence, why not with the law itself? It was this unwavering belief in his ability to change the world that made him both loved and loathed. But as the minutes ticked by, even Judge Harris began to feel a flicker of doubt. Could Musk really be right? Was the law really lagging behind the innovation that Musk was driving? As the judge sat back in his chair, contemplating Musk's words, a small voice in the back of his mind asked, what if Musk wasn't just a businessman? What if he was something more? Judge Nathaniel Harris was not a man to be easily impressed. He had spent nearly 3 decades on the bench, rising through the ranks of the judicial system with an impeccable reputation for fairness and decisiveness. His career was built on precedent, procedure, and the principle that the law must be upheld, no matter the circumstances. He was the type of judge who appreciated order and logic, someone who believed that the courtroom was a space where even the most powerful had to bow to the law. Born in Boston to a family of academics, Harris had grown up in a home where the value of knowledge was drilled into him from an early age. His father, a law professor at Harvard, had often spoken about the noble pursuit of justice, a mantra that Harris took to heart throughout his career. His mother, a renowned historian, had taught him to appreciate the long arc of history, to understand that decisions made today often had far-reaching consequences. Harris's law career had begun with humble intentions. He had attended Yale Law School, driven by a desire to make a difference, but quickly realized the legal world was not as simple as it had seemed in the textbooks. Over time, he became more and more disillusioned with the slow-moving bureaucracy of the system, but that did not stop him from excelling in his field. His specialty was corporate law, and he had earned his place as a judge by advocating for practical, no-nonsense rulings that were clear-cut and difficult to dispute. His work had brought him into contact with some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in the country. He'd presided over cases involving major corporations, government contracts, and, on occasion, individuals who were larger than life. But no case had ever tested his convictions like this one. Judge Harris's first encounter with Elon Musk had come years earlier, in a legal dispute between Musk's SpaceX and a rival aerospace company. The case had been relatively minor, a patent dispute over rocket technology, but Harris had been struck by Musk's tenacity and unconventional approach to the law. Most people in Musk's position would have hired an army of high-priced lawyers to handle the case, but Musk had insisted on personally guiding his legal team. It wasn't just about winning the case for Musk, it was about shaping the rules of the game. That encounter had left a mark on Harris. Musk was not like other businessmen. His mind worked in a way that seemed to ignore conventional boundaries. The judge had respected Musk's intelligence, but he also found him frustrating. There was something about Musk's habit of bending the rules, even if it wasn't always illegal, that irked Harris. He had often found himself wondering whether Musk believed the law existed to serve him or to be challenged by him. Now, here Musk was again, standing before him in his courtroom, this time over a technical violation that, on the surface, seemed straightforward enough. But Harris knew better than to assume anything when it came to Musk. The man had a way of turning the most mundane situations into high-stakes battles for the future of technology and industry. As Harris reviewed the case files, he couldn't shake the sense that Musk had already anticipated this moment. It was like he had been preparing for this trial before the ink had even dried on the fine. It was a feeling Harris knew all too well, a sense of unease that grew as he tried to predict Musk's next move. Judge Harris was at a crossroads. For the first time in his career, he found himself questioning his own assumptions. He had always believed that the law should be the final authority, that no one, no matter how wealthy or influential, was above it. But Musk seemed to embody a challenge to that worldview. Harris wasn't sure whether he admired Musk's vision or resented it, but he knew one thing for certain: this case was not going to be like any other he had ever faced. Harris prided himself on his ability to remain impartial, to see the facts of a case without letting personal biases cloud his judgment. But there was something about Musk that made him question everything he thought he knew. Musk's confidence wasn't just arrogance, it was the confidence of someone who truly believed that the rules were there to be rewritten. And as Harris thought about it more, he realized that maybe, just maybe, Musk had a point. Could the law be as outdated as Musk seemed to suggest? Could it be that the system was designed for a world that no longer existed? These thoughts began to swirl in Harris's mind as he prepared for the next stage of the trial. As the trial continued, Harris found himself increasingly drawn into Musk's web. There was more at stake here than just a fine for a regulatory violation. Musk was playing a much larger game, and the judge was beginning to wonder if he was merely a pawn in it. As Musk continued to present his argument, with calm precision and an uncanny grasp of legal precedent, Harris began to feel a shift. This wasn't just a case about a technical violation. This was a challenge to the very foundations of the legal system. And for the first time in his career, Judge Harris wasn't sure whether he was ready to face it. As Musk's defense unfolded in the courtroom, it quickly became clear that this was no ordinary case. What began as a regulatory fine for a seemingly minor violation had become a battle over the very nature of law itself. And Judge Harris, despite his years of experience, found himself struggling to keep his emotions and biases in check. Musk was presenting his case with an almost surgical precision. He cited case law from obscure precedents, legal texts that most judges might overlook, and even brought up moments from history where the law had adapted to breakthroughs in technology. It wasn't just a defense of his actions, it was an argument for the future of law itself, one that Harris could not ignore. "Your Honor," Musk said, leaning forward in his chair, "the law, as it stands, is designed for a world that no longer exists. It's not built for the pace of innovation we are seeing today. When SpaceX successfully landed the first reusable rocket, we didn't just break the laws of physics, we broke the laws of regulation. This fine. It's a reminder of how far behind the law is." Harris, who had seen many a brilliant argument in his time, couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt. Musk wasn't wrong. Space exploration, electric cars, and artificial intelligence were advancing at a rate that legal systems around the world were struggling to keep up with. Harris had long held the belief that the law should be a stable, predictable force that acted as a safeguard against unchecked power. But Musk's words echoed a deeper question: what happens when the law becomes an obstacle to progress? Musk wasn't just playing the role of a defendant, he was playing the role of a visionary. And Harris, despite himself, found it difficult to dismiss him as merely a billionaire tech mogul trying to avoid a fine. Musk had a point, maybe the law needed to evolve in order to keep pace with the innovations of the 21st century. The prosecution, meanwhile, wasn't backing down. The government lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Cassandra Moore, took the floor. She was known for her relentless focus on facts and procedure, and she wasn't about to let Musk's philosophical musings derail the case. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice steady and authoritative, "I understand that you're a man of extraordinary achievement. But the law is not meant to bend to the will of a single individual, no matter how influential. The regulations you violated exist for a reason, to protect the public, ensure safety, and maintain order in industries where lives and billions of dollars are at stake. You can't simply redefine the law because it's inconvenient for you." Musk didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to redefine the law, Ms. Moore. I'm trying to show you that it's outdated. And if we don't begin to question these outdated systems, we risk stifling progress. I've seen it happen before. And I won't sit idly by while it happens again." The room was electric. The tension between the two sides was palpable. It wasn't just about the fine anymore, it was about a fundamental clash of ideals: should the law serve the people, or should the people serve the law? Musk's relentless drive to challenge the system had always been a defining characteristic. But as the trial progressed, something more profound became clear: Musk wasn't just fighting for his own interests, he was fighting for a future where technology could flourish without being shackled by outdated regulations. He wasn't just thinking about SpaceX or Tesla, he was thinking about the entire future of human progress. On the other hand, Cassandra Moore, the prosecution, represented the voice of caution, order, and preservation. She believed in the stability that law provided and feared the chaos that could result from unchecked innovation. For her, the law wasn't something to be questioned, it was something to be upheld. She was the counterbalance to Musk's radical vision. But deep down, even Moore couldn't completely ignore the nagging question: was Musk right? Was the law standing in the way of progress? Judge Harris, sitting at the center of this ideological battle, could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had spent his career upholding the law, believing in its power to provide structure and security. But Musk's words had struck a chord. There was something unsettlingly true about them. The law was built in a different era, a slower era. Could it keep up with the speed of progress that Musk was championing? Harris found himself torn. He had always viewed the law as a shield, an unwavering fortress against the unpredictability of life. But now, as he sat in the courtroom, he couldn't help but feel that the fortress was crumbling around him. Musk's conviction, his belief in the transformative power of technology, was compelling. But Moore's steady arguments grounded him in the importance of safeguarding society from the dangers of unchecked change. Harris thought back to his early years as a judge, when the law seemed like a clear and simple tool. He remembered his father's lessons about justice and order, about how the law was the foundation of a civilized society. Yet, as he listened to Musk, he couldn't ignore the possibility that Musk was right, that society's foundations were changing beneath their feet, and the law might not be built to withstand it. As the day's proceedings came to a close, Judge Harris made an unexpected decision. He would not deliver his verdict right away. Instead, he ordered a recess, giving both sides time to present further arguments. But there was something else in his mind, a sense that this trial was not just about Musk's fine, but about something much larger. The question that lingered in the air was simple: could the law evolve without losing its integrity? The courtroom emptied for the day, but the questions remained. Was Elon Musk truly a legal genius, or was he simply a man with an unyielding belief in his own vision? And what did it mean for the future of law if he were right? The morning sun spilled through the tall windows of the courthouse, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. The tension in the air was palpable as Judge Harris took his seat, his gavel poised to call the courtroom into session. Today, Musk's fate, and the future of the law itself, would begin to take shape. The recess had given both sides ample time to prepare their next moves, and it was clear that both Musk and Cassandra Moore were ready for battle. Musk had spent the break pacing around his private office, his mind racing with ideas. He knew that this case wasn't just about his fine, it was about changing the way the law interacted with progress. He had prepared a new argument, one that would force the court to confront a difficult truth. Across the courtroom, Cassandra Moore sat at her desk, reviewing her notes. She had anticipated Musk's move, and now it was her turn to respond. She wasn't going to let Musk derail the legal system with his lofty ideals. The law, she believed, was not a tool for personal agendas, it was a protector of society. When the courtroom finally settled and Harris banged the gavel, the silence was deafening. Let the record reflect that the recess is over. Mr. Musk, you may proceed with your additional argument. Musk stood slowly, his tall frame towering over the defense table. He glanced at the judge, then turned to face the courtroom. His expression was calm, but behind his eyes, there was a fire, a belief that what he was about to say could change everything. Your Honor, he began, his voice steady, I've had time to reflect on our previous discussion, and I've come to realize that this isn't just about a fine. This is about a fundamental question: what is the law's role when it no longer serves the greater good? He paused, letting the question linger in the air. The laws that regulate industries like space exploration, transportation, and artificial intelligence were written long before these technologies even existed. They were created for a world where innovation moved at a slower pace, where we weren't sending reusable rockets into space or creating electric cars that could drive themselves. But in this new world, those laws are choking progress. They're built for a world that no longer exists. Musk's words echoed through the courtroom, and for the first time, even some of the spectators seemed to be paying closer attention. He wasn't just defending himself, he was presenting a vision, a new way forward. Now, I'm not suggesting that we do away with the law altogether. But I do believe that the law must evolve. It must adapt to the new realities of our time, or it will become obsolete. Judge Harris leaned forward in his seat, his fingers steepled in front of his mouth. Musk's argument wasn't just an intellectual exercise, it was a call to action. And Harris knew that, in some ways, Musk was right. But at what cost? Cassandra Moore stood up sharply, her heels clicking on the floor. Obsolete? Mr. Musk, I think you misunderstand the role of the law. The law exists to protect society, not to make exceptions for those who think they are above it. The fact that you're trying to redefine the law to fit your personal vision doesn't change the fact that you violated a regulation. A regulation that exists for good reason, to ensure safety, accountability, and fairness in an industry that impacts everyone. Moore's voice was firm, unwavering. She wasn't going to let Musk's idealism cloud the facts. The law, as she saw it, was sacrosanct, and it could not be twisted to fit the whims of a billionaire. Mr. Musk's argument might sound noble, but it ignores a crucial point: the law is designed to protect the public. It is not a tool for entrepreneurs to use to get ahead. The law is not a bargaining chip in the pursuit of profit. Musk's gaze was steady. He had expected this. He had expected Moore to dismiss his argument as an attempt to sidestep responsibility. But that's not what this was. This was a chance to show that the law could be something more. He took a step forward. Ms. Moore, I don't think you understand what I'm saying. I'm not trying to make an exception for myself. What I'm suggesting is that we need to create a framework where progress and regulation work together. The law should be a partner to innovation, not a roadblock. It's time to ask ourselves, how can we regulate the future, when the future has already arrived? The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, there was a shift in the atmosphere. The courtroom, which had been on edge for days, seemed to hold its breath. Judge Harris cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention back to him. Mr. Musk, I understand your argument. I also understand the concerns of the prosecution. But this court is not here to rewrite the law, it is here to apply it. However, I will give both sides one more opportunity to present their final arguments before I render my decision. In this moment, both Musk and Moore had revealed their true motivations. Musk wasn't just fighting for his own interests, he was fighting for a world where innovation could thrive without being held back by archaic regulations. He was positioning himself as a leader of the future, someone who was willing to challenge the very foundations of the legal system to secure a better tomorrow. On the other hand, Moore's defense of the law was rooted in her belief that society needed protection, and the law was the only thing standing between order and chaos. Her unwavering dedication to preserving the status quo spoke to her fear of what might happen if regulations became malleable. For her, the law was the bedrock of civilization. To change it recklessly would invite disaster. As Judge Harris listened to both sides, he realized that this wasn't just a legal battle, it was a philosophical one. Musk was asking the court to see the world as he did, a world where the pace of progress was outstripping the ability of the law to keep up. Moore, meanwhile, was asking the court to remember the purpose of the law, to protect society from the unknown consequences of unchecked power. For the first time, the courtroom felt like it was on the edge of a seismic shift. The tension between the two sides was more than just intellectual, it was emotional. Musk believed in a future that could break free from old constraints, while Moore believed that holding on to the past was the only way to ensure safety and security. The judge, sitting between them, was about to make a decision that would shape the course of history. As the day came to an end, Judge Harris left the courtroom with a heavy heart. He knew the decision he was about to make would not only impact Musk, but it would send a message about the future of the legal system itself. The world was changing, and the law had to change with it, or risk becoming irrelevant. With the stakes higher than ever, the final chapter of this courtroom battle was approaching. Would Judge Harris uphold the law, or would he pave the way for a new legal era, one where the rules were written by those shaping the future? The courtroom was quiet as Judge Harris entered, his robes sweeping the floor as he made his way to the bench. His face, usually an unreadable mask of professionalism, now betrayed the weight of the decision that lay ahead. The case had escalated far beyond its original scope. What had begun as a simple fine for a regulatory violation was now a battle over the future of the law itself. As Harris settled into his seat, his gavel hovered above the block, as if even it hesitated to make a sound. He had spent countless hours reviewing the arguments, the evidence, and the perspectives of both sides. But the problem was that this case didn't have an easy answer. There were no clear lines here, only blurred boundaries between the established order and the promise of progress. Musk sat at the defense table, his usual calm demeanor betraying a flicker of anticipation. Despite his composed exterior, he couldn't deny the stakes. If Judge Harris ruled against him, it would be more than just a financial penalty, it would signal that the law, as it stood, could not, and would not, bend to accommodate the future Musk envisioned. That was a world Musk couldn't accept. Cassandra Moore sat opposite him, her posture stiff, her eyes narrowed as she prepared for whatever final argument might come. She believed in the law, what it stood for, what it protected. And she wasn't about to let Elon Musk rewrite it to suit his own agenda. Judge Harris finally spoke, his voice cutting through the silence. After careful consideration of all arguments presented in this case, it is clear to me that we are not simply dealing with a legal violation of a technical nature. We are facing a challenge to the very framework of our legal system, a framework that has been built over centuries to balance progress with safety, order with freedom. It is not a decision I make lightly. The words hung in the air, and every person in the room leaned forward, knowing that the verdict was coming. Judge Harris, throughout his career, had prided himself on being a man of logic and reason. He trusted the law, its rigidity, its order, and he had long considered it a tool for societal stability. But as this trial had progressed, he found himself caught in a philosophical whirlwind. Musk, for all his brashness and ego, had forced him to confront the uncomfortable truth that the world was changing faster than the law could keep up. Harris had spent most of his life believing that the law should be unchanging, a steady anchor. But what if that anchor was holding society back? What if, instead of grounding the ship, it was keeping it stuck in place, unable to sail into the future? On the other hand, Musk's belief that the law was obsolete, merely an obstacle to progress, struck Harris as dangerously idealistic. Musk was a visionary, no doubt. But his willingness to bend the rules to his will had made Harris uneasy. How far was Musk willing to go? And how much power should a single individual have in shaping the future? Judge Harris felt like he was standing at the precipice, looking into an uncertain future. The weight of his decision felt immense. This wasn't just about the fine, it was about the kind of world they were leaving behind for the next generation. Should the law evolve to meet the challenges of the future, or should it remain rooted in the traditions of the past? As he looked across the courtroom, his eyes met Musk's, who was sitting with an almost predatory calm. Musk's confidence was hard to ignore, even if Harris disagreed with his methods. On the other side, Moore's face was set in stone, unyielding, resolute. She wasn't here to entertain grand ideas, she was here to ensure that the law, in its current form, held fast. The two sides seemed so far apart, and Harris knew that his verdict could either validate Musk's vision or uphold the ideals that Moore and the law represented. Harris let the silence linger before speaking again. I find myself in a difficult position, but I believe this is a question that transcends the specific facts of this case. It is a question of principle. The law is not meant to serve one person's vision of the future, nor is it meant to stifle progress. It exists to protect the common good, to ensure safety, fairness, and accountability. There was a pause as he looked directly at Musk. However, I also recognize that the pace of innovation is moving faster than the law can respond. The question is not whether the law should evolve, it is how. Mr. Musk has presented an argument that cannot be ignored. We must acknowledge that the law must change, and that, in some areas, it must change quickly. However, this change must occur through the proper channels and with the necessary safeguards in place. Harris stood, his gavel raised in a final motion. The fine imposed on Mr. Musk remains, as the violation in question was clear. But this court will take steps to ensure that the regulatory system evolves to meet the needs of the future. I will be ordering a review of the current regulations surrounding emerging technologies, including those in space exploration and artificial intelligence. This review will be conducted by a panel of experts, and new frameworks will be developed to better accommodate the changing landscape. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, but Harris's voice cut through the noise. This decision is not an endorsement of Mr. Musk's philosophy, but it is an acknowledgement that the law must adapt if it is to remain relevant. The future cannot be ignored, nor can it be held back. The question is how we will meet it. Harris had made a decision that few judges would have been willing to make. He had, in effect, conceded that Musk's vision for the future had merit. The law, as it was, couldn't keep up with the rapid pace of technological progress. But Harris had also taken a stand for the integrity of the legal system. His decision was a middle ground, an attempt to preserve the stability of the law while simultaneously acknowledging the need for reform. For Musk, this was a partial victory. He hadn't been absolved of the fine, but he had won a crucial battle. His argument that the law needed to evolve had been heard and taken seriously. But it wasn't the total win he had hoped for. There was still work to be done, and the fight for the future wasn't over. For Cassandra Moore, this decision was a blow to the status quo. The law had been reaffirmed, but it had also been shown to be outdated. She had fought hard to protect the integrity of the current system, but even she could see that things had to change. For the first time, Harris felt a sense of resolution. The law was not static, it was alive, evolving in real time. And though the decision wasn't perfect, it felt like a step towards something larger. Musk had presented a challenge that no one else had been able to, and for that, Harris had to give him credit. But he also knew that the law's role in society wasn't to bend to every whim of the powerful, it was to safeguard the public, even in the face of progress. This case was far from over. The panel Harris had ordered would lead to a broader conversation about the future of law and innovation. Musk's influence on the legal system was only beginning to be felt. But one thing was clear, the world was changing, and the law was going to have to change with it. The courtroom had been silent for a moment, but as Musk stood up to leave, his eyes gleamed with the knowledge that he had already set in motion something much bigger than just this case. The future is now, he had said earlier. And today, Musk had taken another step toward making that future a reality. But the question remained, could the law evolve fast enough to keep up with him? The decision had sent shockwaves through the courtroom, but it wasn't just the people present in the room who felt its impact. As Judge Harris's ruling echoed through the legal world, Musk supporters and critics alike began to process the significance of the verdict. It was the kind of ruling that could change the course of history, or at the very least, spark a necessary debate about the relationship between innovation and regulation. For Elon Musk, this was just the beginning. As he walked out of the courthouse, his mind was already racing, plotting his next move. This ruling had validated his position that the law was outdated, that it couldn't keep up with the rapid pace of technological progress. But Musk knew that this was only one battle in a much larger war. There were regulations to be rewritten, new frameworks to be built, and the broader public perception of his mission to change the world to win over. The fine was a minor setback for someone of his wealth and influence, but the fact that his vision was now officially recognized by the highest levels of the legal system, well, that was something far more valuable. It was a platform. Musk's outward confidence masked the relentless pressure he was under. Every move he made, every word he spoke, seemed to have ripple effects. He had become more than just a billionaire entrepreneur, he had become the face of a new movement, one that questioned the very foundations of law and order. Musk was no longer just trying to innovate within existing systems, he was setting out to build entirely new ones. But even as Musk celebrated his partial victory, there were moments of doubt. The journey ahead was uncertain, and while the court had acknowledged the need for change, it had also made it clear that such change would come with limitations. Would Musk's influence be enough to overhaul the entire regulatory landscape, or would there be more opposition than he anticipated? On the other side, Cassandra Moore was grappling with her own feelings about the ruling. Despite the setback, she refused to let her faith in the law falter. She believed in its integrity, in its ability to adapt to changing circumstances, just not at the pace Musk wanted. The ruling had been a blow to her cause, but she was nothing if not determined. The law had to remain strong, even if it had to evolve. And she wasn't going to stop fighting for it. As the ruling became public, the media outlets swarmed. Social media platforms were ablaze with opinions, analyses, and debates. Some hailed Musk as a revolutionary who had managed to force the courts to recognize the need for a new kind of law, one that could keep up with the exponential growth of technology. Others decried his win as a dangerous precedent that could allow billionaires to bend the law to their will. Musk was interviewed by a range of journalists, each asking the same question: what's next? He remained calm and composed, his usual charismatic self. "I'm not here to make enemies," he told one reporter, his voice smooth and confident. "I'm here to make a difference. The court has taken the first step, but there's still a long way to go. We need laws that protect the future, not just the past. And I intend to make sure that happens." But not everyone was buying into Musk's message. Critics like Senator Rachel Green, a vocal advocate for strict regulations in emerging technologies, wasted no time in condemning the ruling. "This decision sends the wrong message," she said during an interview on a popular news show. "It says that those with money and influence can bypass the law and get away with it. We cannot let the whims of one billionaire dictate the future of our society. This is a dangerous precedent." Despite the pushback, Musk's supporters were undeterred. They argued that the law, in its current state, was holding back progress in crucial industries like space travel, artificial intelligence, and renewable energy. Musk, they believed, was the catalyst for much-needed change. Behind the scenes, the legal world was also abuzz. Law firms, regulatory bodies, and government agencies began to prepare for the wave of reforms that were expected to follow. The ruling had prompted an official review of current laws, which would likely lead to legislative changes in a number of critical sectors. At the Department of Justice, a group of lawyers was convened to discuss how to handle the upcoming revisions. Some of the country's top legal minds gathered around a large table, papers and documents scattered before them. One of the senior lawyers, William Hayes, looked over the ruling with skepticism. "Look, Musk has made his case, but the real question is, where do we draw the line? If we give him what he wants in this case, what's next? Are we going to start rewriting every law to suit every tech mogul who feels their business is being hindered by the current system?" Another lawyer, Jennifer Collins, pushed back. "We can't ignore the fact that the technological landscape has changed dramatically in the last few decades. If the law doesn't evolve with it, we risk stifling innovation. Look at how regulations in the tech industry were written 20 years ago. They are outdated now. Musk might be the first, but he won't be the last to call for this kind of reform." Hayes sighed. "I get that, but the stakes are high. The public is already divided on Musk. If we push this through without careful consideration, we might end up with a system where regulations are bent for the few, while everyone else gets left behind. And where does that leave us?" The group remained divided, but one thing was clear: the review process was about to set off a chain reaction that would affect not just Musk and his companies, but the entire tech industry. The ripple effect had begun, and its impact would be felt for years to come. For Cassandra Moore, the ruling felt like both a defeat and a wake-up call. She knew that Musk wasn't going to stop at one court case. If anything, this ruling had only given him more fuel for his fire. But she wasn't ready to concede. Not yet. Moore began preparing for her next move. She reached out to colleagues, law professors, and even politicians who shared her concerns about Musk's influence on the legal system. She wasn't going to let him use this victory as a stepping stone to further bend the law in his favor. She would fight, just as she always had, with everything at her disposal. Her focus shifted to two things: appealing the decision in the court of public opinion, and preparing for the impending regulatory review. She knew the battle was far from over. If Musk wanted to change the law, she was ready to take him on. For both Musk and Moore, the events of the past few weeks had solidified their roles in the larger narrative. Musk had become more than just an entrepreneur, he was now a figurehead for an ideological movement, someone who believed that the law should adapt to progress. His commitment to innovation was unwavering, and he was willing to take on the entire legal system if it meant creating a new world. Moore, on the other hand, was more than just a lawyer now. She was a defender of the system. The law, in her eyes, was the backbone of society. Without it, there could be chaos. And while she acknowledged the need for reform, she wasn't ready to let Musk, or anyone else, reshape the system to their liking. She would stand firm, and she would fight for what she believed in, no matter the cost. As Musk and Moore prepared for their next steps, both knew that their fight was far from over. The regulatory review would provide the next battleground, but it would be a slow process. While Musk worked on pushing his agenda through back channels and with his network of supporters, Moore began to strategize how to rally public sentiment against Musk's ideas. One thing was certain: the conversation about the future of the law was just beginning. Would Musk's vision become reality, or would Moore and her allies be able to preserve the rule of law in its current form? As Musk and Moore took their positions for the next phase of their respective campaigns, the world waited. The battle over the future of the law, and the future of technology, was far from decided. Who would win the war for the future? The dust had barely settled from the ruling when the official process to review existing regulations began. Musk's case had opened the door, but it was clear now that the question of how the law should evolve was no longer just an intellectual debate, it was an urgent political and legal battle that would affect the future of industries ranging from space exploration to artificial intelligence, and everything in between. The panel, composed of a mixture of government officials, tech experts, and legal scholars, was tasked with reviewing the regulatory frameworks that govern emerging technologies. It was a group made up of people with widely varying perspectives, and there was no question that the discussions would be heated. Some panel members were sympathetic to Musk's cause, seeing his innovations as part of a larger shift toward a new technological frontier. Others, however, were firmly in the camp of protecting the public interest and ensuring that the pace of innovation did not outstrip the ability of the law to ensure safety, fairness, and accountability. Musk had already started to assemble his team of legal experts, policy advisors, and public relations strategists to influence the review. He had cultivated a network of powerful allies over the years: government officials, influential figures in the tech world, and even academics who were sympathetic to his mission. He knew the review process would take time, but he was determined to use every tool at his disposal to accelerate the inevitable changes to the law. Musk was no stranger to pushing boundaries, but this was a new challenge. The legal world was a different battlefield from the boardrooms of his companies, and it wasn't one he could easily conquer by sheer force of will. For the first time in a long while, he found himself having to be patient, laying the groundwork for long-term change rather than achieving immediate results. Still, patience wasn't one of Musk's strongest virtues. He was driven by a sense of urgency, the belief that the future was slipping away from humanity unless technological progress was accelerated. The regulatory review wasn't just about getting the laws rewritten to his liking, it was about positioning himself as the architect of the future. If he could get ahead of the game, he could control the narrative and shape the emerging laws in ways that suited his vision. But even Musk had his doubts. The panel was made up of a mix of politicians, experts, and skeptics, people who didn't always see eye to eye with him. And although his vision was grand, not everyone shared his confidence that the law could evolve fast enough to meet the challenges of a rapidly changing world. Musk had to walk a fine line, championing innovation while convincing the regulatory bodies that it was in everyone's best interest. While Musk was assembling his allies, Cassandra Moore was working overtime to mount a counterattack. She knew that the review process would be an opportunity to press her case, that the law should evolve, but not at the cost of safeguards, fairness, and the common good. Musk's actions might have been bold and visionary, but they were also reckless. If his model of unrestrained innovation was allowed to dominate, Moore believed that it would leave ordinary people vulnerable to exploitation, manipulation, and unforeseen consequences. She reached out to like-minded legal scholars and public interest groups, hoping to build a coalition that could argue for a slower, more deliberate approach to technological progress. The review panel would be a battleground, but it wasn't just a matter of legal argument. Moore understood that public sentiment could play a huge role in shaping the outcome. She couldn't let Musk's narrative, one of unchecked technological advancement, become the prevailing one. Moore also began reaching out to a few key allies in Congress, those who shared her concerns about the potential for tech billionaires to rewrite the rules in their favor. They needed to raise awareness about the potential dangers of the unchecked power that Musk was trying to wield. The battle was no longer just in the courts, it was in the hearts and minds of the people. She had a few meetings with influential reporters, making sure that the issues surrounding Musk's case remained in the public eye. Her goal was to keep the debate alive and to show the people that Musk's ideas about law and progress weren't necessarily in their best interests. The media played a crucial role in the lead-up to the regulatory review. Articles, op-eds, and televised debates began to dominate the conversation. On one side, Musk's vision of a more adaptable legal system was championed as the solution to the challenges of the modern age. On the other, Moore's message about the need for caution and regulation found an audience among those who feared the consequences of a lawless future. The public was divided. In Musk's camp were those who admired his boldness and foresight, young, idealistic tech enthusiasts, libertarians, and those who believed that government interference stifled innovation. On the other side were those who feared the unchecked power of billionaires and the erosion of democratic processes. The older generation, in particular, found Musk's approach unsettling, seeing it as an affront to the rule of law and a threat to the stability of society. The debate grew more heated with each passing day. On social media, commentators and influencers fueled the fire, taking sides in what had now become a public referendum on the future of law and technology. One evening, a major TV news outlet hosted a live debate featuring Musk, Moore, and a select panel of experts. The topic: is it time to change the law to keep up with technology, or is it time to rein in the power of Silicon Valley? Musk entered the debate with his usual confidence, dressed in his typical black t-shirt and blazer. He was calm, assured, and had his arguments rehearsed. He framed the issue as a matter of survival. The law, as it stood, was holding back humanity's potential. The pace of technological progress is accelerating, Musk argued. The law was never designed to handle the speed at which we innovate. If we don't change it now, we risk stagnation. We risk being left behind. This is not just about me or my companies, it's about the future of humanity. Cassandra Moore countered by focusing on the ethical concerns. What Mr. Musk is advocating is an unfettered world where the powerful get to make the rules, with no accountability. We cannot afford to allow a few tech moguls to control the future of our society. The law is there to protect the vulnerable, to ensure that no one is above the rules, and to ensure that progress doesn't come at the expense of the common good. The debate raged on for hours, but it was clear that the public was split. Musk had his supporters, but Moore had hers. Musk's confidence in his message grew. Each time he faced opposition, he felt the adrenaline rush of a challenge. This was what he lived for, the ability to confront the status quo and force it to evolve. But his passion for the cause was beginning to show signs of a deeper purpose. He wasn't just fighting for profit or advancement, he was fighting for a new world order, one where his vision could shape the future. Moore, on the other hand, was starting to feel the weight of her responsibility. She knew that this battle was bigger than just a legal case, it was about the direction of society. She was beginning to realize just how much was at stake, how important it was to not just win this fight but to change the way people thought about the relationship between the law and technology. The review panel was now in full swing, and while Musk and Moore squared off in public, the real battle was being fought behind closed doors. Legislators were beginning to look at ways to make the law more adaptable, but whether they would go as far as Musk wanted remained uncertain. Meanwhile, Moore's coalition was pushing hard to ensure that any reforms were slow, deliberate, and carried out with the necessary safeguards. The decisions made in the coming months would not only shape the future of law, they would determine the role of tech giants like Musk in the world of tomorrow. As the debate rages on, one question remains: who will ultimately win this battle for the future? Will the law evolve to keep up with technology, or will the law hold firm and protect society from the dangers of unchecked progress? The intense media debate between Musk and Moore had reverberated across the globe. While the courtroom battle had been an isolated, legal conflict, the public spectacle was different. The stakes had been raised. As the regulatory review panel convened, both sides realized the broader implications of their actions were playing out on a much larger stage. This wasn't just a war over tech regulations, it had become a cultural conflict, a battle for the soul of progress. Musk's camp had successfully framed the argument as one about innovation versus stagnation. But as the regulatory review continued to heat up, it became clear that there were new forces at play, forces neither side had fully anticipated. An unexpected movement was emerging. Grassroots tech advocates, many of whom had once hailed Musk as a hero, were now questioning whether his vision was truly in line with their own values. Elon Musk had always been the face of Silicon Valley, a symbol of disruptive genius, a figure who embodied the idea that technology could solve the world's most pressing problems. But now, there was a quiet backlash brewing in the heart of his empire. A growing number of tech enthusiasts, developers, and young entrepreneurs began to voice concerns about Musk's increasingly authoritarian stance on regulation. While many still admired him for his boldness and ambition, they felt uneasy about the way he was leveraging his influence to push for a legal framework that could consolidate power in the hands of a few. Musk had been vocal in his desire to bypass outdated bureaucratic systems that impeded progress, but some in the tech community feared that if Musk succeeded, it could lead to an even more centralized, tech-driven power structure, one where corporations, rather than governments, set the rules. The argument wasn't necessarily that Musk was wrong, but that his vision was incomplete. These critics argued that the innovation Musk championed needed to be paired with transparency and accountability, not simply freedom from regulation. A number of prominent figures in the tech world, including developers of open-source software, began to question whether Musk's interpretation of freedom could come at too high a price. Some of these voices were rising in opposition to Musk's dominant narrative. Musk, for the first time in his life, was hearing criticism not just from the public or from established political structures, but from the very community that had helped build him up. The dissonance between his vision of the future and the values of some of his closest allies was unsettling. This wasn't the battle he had imagined. It wasn't about laws and regulations anymore, it was about ideals, and his own place within them. On the other side, Cassandra Moore had been using Musk's growing vulnerability to her advantage. She had spent years working in the trenches of law, trying to balance progress with caution, and now she was seeing her efforts bear fruit. The backlash from within Musk's camp had created an opening. In private meetings with her political allies, Moore began to shift the conversation away from the hard-nosed battle about whether the law should adapt quickly, and toward a more subtle argument: what does progress really mean? She wasn't just defending the status quo, she was redefining the conversation. Moore had always believed that progress had to be about more than just technology. It had to be about human progress. And the law, she argued, was a vital mechanism for ensuring that humanity benefited from technological advancements without becoming subservient to them. Her coalition was gaining momentum. Legal scholars, civil rights activists, and social justice groups rallied to her side. They didn't just fear Musk's idea of progress, they feared the way his influence could alter the very fabric of democracy. To them, Musk wasn't just challenging the law, he was challenging the core values that held society together. Cassandra's arguments about accountability, equity, and the long-term consequences of unchecked progress were starting to resonate. People, especially those who felt left behind in the rush toward the future, were beginning to listen. This wasn't just about technology, it was about power and who controlled it. While Musk and Moore fought their battles in the corridors of power, there was another, unseen force at work. The public. As the regulatory review panel continued to meet behind closed doors, public opinion was becoming an increasingly important factor. The debate had expanded beyond the legal and tech communities and into the broader public discourse. Ordinary people, many of whom didn't have the technical expertise to fully grasp the complexities of the law or technology, were now being asked to make up their minds about the future. Polls showed a nation divided. Many citizens believed that Musk represented the future. He was a man who had taken on enormous challenges and delivered results. To them, his vision was inspiring, and they wanted to see the government get out of the way so that Musk could continue his mission. They saw him as the person who could solve climate change, get humanity to Mars, and radically change the way we lived. But there were others who were concerned that Musk's unchecked ambition could lead to a future where the rich and powerful controlled everything. These people were worried about the ethical implications of his work. They feared that innovation, without proper oversight, could create a society where power was concentrated in the hands of a few, leaving the majority vulnerable to exploitation. Social media was abuzz with debates about the role of government in regulating technology, with hashtags like #Musk versus the law trending across platforms. Public rallies began to emerge, with people gathering to voice their support for one side or the other. It was clear that the decision made by the regulatory review panel would not just affect the future of the law, but the future of society as a whole. The media's role in this battle couldn't be overstated. They were the megaphone through which each side broadcasted their message. Musk's PR team was working overtime, flooding the airwaves with statements about how regulation was slowing down the future and how his innovations were poised to change the world. But Moore's camp had its own strategy. They didn't just fight the fight in the courts or in policy meetings, they fought it in the headlines. Legal experts, ethicists, and social theorists were regularly invited onto news programs to argue the case for a more cautious, more deliberate approach to innovation. Moore's message was clear: technology could transform the world, but only if it served all of humanity, not just a select few. And in the midst of all this, the review panel was quietly watching. Public opinion, media coverage, and the growing influence of both Musk and Moore had turned the review process into something much bigger than anyone had anticipated. Musk's character was evolving. Once driven purely by the desire to push humanity forward, he was now faced with the possibility that his vision might not be as universally accepted as he had once thought. His brilliant mind had always been about finding solutions, but now he was starting to realize that solutions without empathy, without consideration for the consequences, could lead to problems that were much worse than the ones he sought to fix. Cassandra Moore, meanwhile, was growing into her role as the defender of the law. At first, she had been a simple advocate for regulation. But now, she had become a symbol of the fight for a more just, equitable society. Her conviction had solidified: she wasn't just fighting for the law, she was fighting for a future where innovation was done with care and consideration for everyone, not just the powerful few. The regulatory review was coming to a head. The panel's final recommendations were drawing near, and every decision made would have a lasting impact. Musk's push for fast-paced change was colliding head-on with Moore's defense of thoughtful, deliberative action. But what would happen when the review panel finally delivered its decision? Would they side with Musk's vision of an unregulated future, or would they support Moore's call for accountability and oversight? The future of technology, the law, and society itself hung in the balance. As the final stages of the review process approached, Musk and Moore prepared for their last big showdown. Who would control the future? The innovators or the protectors? The moment of truth had arrived. The regulatory review panel had been deliberating for months, but now the final vote was imminent. The stage had been set. Musk had spent every waking moment strategizing, lobbying, and working his networks to secure the outcome he wanted. Cassandra Moore, meanwhile, had mobilized a coalition of advocates, legal experts, and lawmakers to ensure that any decision made would protect the public interest, prevent corporate overreach, and set a firm foundation for responsible technological progress. The final report was slated to be released within days, and the air was thick with anticipation. Behind the scenes, pressure from both sides was mounting. Musk's vision of an unfettered future, where technology could evolve without hindrance, was one step closer to becoming reality. But Moore's camp wasn't backing down. They had made sure that every possible avenue was being explored to ensure that any new laws would not undermine society's foundational values of fairness, transparency, and accountability. Elon Musk had always been accustomed to success. He was the visionary who had revolutionized industries. From Tesla to SpaceX, his name was synonymous with risk, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of progress. But lately, something had shifted. The public's growing skepticism, the internal dissent within his own circle, and the stark opposition from Moore's camp had shaken him more than he was willing to admit. In private moments, Musk had begun to question whether his singular focus on disrupting the status quo had blinded him to the larger implications of his actions. He had built a career by questioning everything, by challenging norms and tearing down obstacles. But now, the very thing he had built was under fire. While he still firmly believed in the need for change, he had begun to see the cracks in the foundation of his own argument. The critics weren't all wrong. Yes, the world needed progress. Yes, the law was outdated. But Musk now understood that the speed at which he wanted to push the envelope could very well leave society behind, creating a chasm between the few who could keep up and the many who would be left behind. He had been so focused on speeding up the future, he had neglected to consider the human cost of that acceleration. Yet even with this dawning realization, Musk wasn't about to back down. He knew that if he didn't fight for his vision, no one else would. And despite his doubts, the world was still waiting for the bold, visionary leader who could take humanity to the next level. The question was, could he do so without sacrificing the very society he was trying to save? Cassandra Moore, too, was grappling with the weight of the situation. Throughout the battle, she had been steadfast, her commitment to public accountability never wavering. But now, as the final decision loomed, there was a palpable sense of uncertainty. She knew that the stakes were higher than ever. It wasn't just a question of winning or losing, it was about defining the future of technology and its role in society. Moore had spent decades working within the system, navigating the complexities of law, policy, and government. She had seen firsthand how easily unchecked power could corrupt, how corporate greed could bend the system to its will. The decisions made in the coming days could either uphold the democratic principles she held dear or pave the way for a new era of corporate dominance. For Moore, this wasn't just about her career or her legacy, it was about protecting the people. The lives of millions, perhaps billions, were on the line. Technology, as powerful as it was, could not be left unchecked. History had shown that without oversight, without a moral compass, progress could easily become a weapon. She was fighting for a world where innovation benefited all people, not just the few at the top. But she, too, couldn't ignore the fact that the world was changing. The rapid pace of technological advancement was undeniable, and it was clear that any attempt to halt progress entirely would be futile. What Moore had always advocated for was a balanced approach, one where progress could thrive, but within the constraints of ethical responsibility and fairness. She had crafted her arguments carefully, built coalitions, and delivered speeches that resonated with the public. But now, as the panel prepared to issue its final report, Moore knew that the next few days would be the most critical of her life. As the hours ticked down to the day of the final vote, both Musk and Moore prepared for the culmination of everything they had worked for. The regulatory review panel was set to announce its findings at a live-streamed press conference, a moment that would be watched by millions around the world. Both sides were on edge. Musk had assembled a team of lobbyists and legal experts who had been working tirelessly to ensure that the recommendations leaned in his favor. His team had built relationships with key lawmakers, some of whom were already aligned with Musk's vision. If the panel's report recommended broad deregulation, Musk would have the support he needed to push through the changes quickly. Moore, however, had been more methodical in her approach. She knew that the panel was deeply divided, and while some members were sympathetic to Musk's arguments, others shared her belief in the importance of checks and balances. Moore had worked tirelessly to create public pressure, engaging with journalists, mobilizing protest groups, and holding discussions with lawmakers who were wary of the unchecked influence of tech moguls. She hoped that the public's outcry would influence the final recommendations. The press conference was held in the grand halls of the Regulatory Review Panel's headquarters. Hundreds of journalists packed into the room, their cameras flashing as they anxiously awaited the release of the report. A sense of anticipation hung in the air. The moderator stepped to the podium, their voice cutting through the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. After months of deliberation, the Regulatory Review Panel is ready to present its findings regarding the future of technology regulation in the United States. We will now hear the chairperson's statement." The chairperson, a respected law professor, adjusted his glasses and began speaking. "After a thorough examination of existing laws, technologies, and their impact on society, we have arrived at our recommendations. The future of technological innovation requires a new legal framework, one that balances progress with responsibility. Our panel recognizes the importance of fostering innovation, but it also acknowledges the need for safeguards to protect the public, ensure fairness, and maintain democratic values." The words hit like a thunderclap. The panel had taken a middle ground. Musk's face remained impassive, though he could feel the blood rushing in his ears. The recommendations weren't entirely what he had hoped for. While the panel had endorsed the idea of fast-tracking certain technological advancements and reducing bureaucratic red tape, it had also emphasized the importance of strong regulatory oversight in certain sectors, particularly in AI, space exploration, and data privacy. For Moore, the victory wasn't total, but it was significant. The panel had called for increased transparency in the development of emerging technologies, stricter privacy protections, and accountability measures for companies like Tesla and SpaceX. While Musk's vision of rapid deregulation had been tempered, the panel's decision wasn't a win for traditionalism either. In that moment, both Musk and Moore realized the same truth: the future wasn't something that could be molded by one person's vision alone. Musk's dream of radical change had been tempered by the need for caution, while Moore had been reminded that the world couldn't afford to halt progress in the name of safety. The balance between innovation and regulation was delicate, and it was something that would require constant negotiation, constant vigilance. The final report would spark new battles in Congress, in the courts, and in the streets. The struggle for control over the future was far from over. But for Musk and Moore, this chapter was complete. The future would be shaped not by one vision, but by a balance of forces that would continue to evolve. With the panel's decision out in the open, both Musk and Moore must now confront the reality of living in a world where progress and regulation coexist. Will they both find a way to live with the compromise, or will the battle for the future continue? The Regulatory Review Panel's decision had sent shockwaves through every corner of the tech world. The media was ablaze with reactions, and pundits, influencers, and lawmakers scrambled to interpret the ramifications of the decision. For Musk, it was the first real sign that his plans for a world of rapid, unfettered technological growth might not unfold exactly as he had imagined. For Moore, the victory was bittersweet. She had achieved a meaningful balance, but she knew this was far from the end of the road. The real work was only just beginning. The panel's decision had been a calculated compromise. Musk, while not defeated, felt the sting of regulation pressing in on his vision. His plan for rapid deregulation had been tempered with mandates for increased oversight, particularly in areas like artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, and space exploration. While his innovation-driven agenda still had room to breathe, it was clear that the law would now have more say in how those innovations unfolded. Despite this, Musk wasn't one to back down from a challenge. If anything, the decision spurred him into action. He had made it clear that he was a disruptor, a force of nature who could not be stopped. But this new reality meant that he would have to find creative ways to push the boundaries within the new constraints. Musk held a series of private meetings with his top executives and legal advisors. As usual, his mind was racing, constantly searching for ways to outmaneuver the system, to find a legal loophole or a regulatory gray area where he could continue his mission without the same level of oversight. "Look," Musk began, addressing his team, "the law may be on our backs for now, but innovation doesn't stop. We just need to be smarter about how we approach it. We find the cracks, the opportunities within these new frameworks, and we push through them." His top lawyer, Paul Thompson, a seasoned litigator, hesitated for a moment before speaking up. "Elon, we have to acknowledge that the panel's recommendations are more than just a slap on the wrist, they're the beginning of a more organized, systemic approach to regulation. If we don't play by the rules, we risk the kind of public backlash that could erode our brand and hinder the mission." Musk leaned forward, his face intense. "I get it, Paul. But this is bigger than just legal compliance. This is about shaping the future. There's no way we're going to slow down now. We need to engage with these rules, not let them dictate our every move." The team went quiet. Musk had a way of convincing people that the impossible was just a stepping stone to something greater. Still, even those closest to him could feel the pressure mounting. A new phase was beginning, one where their every move would be watched, scrutinized, and likely challenged. For Cassandra Moore, the regulatory panel's decision felt like a small victory, but one that would need to be carefully managed. She had won a battle, but the war for responsible technological advancement was far from over. The compromise struck by the panel gave her something to work with, but it also created new challenges. The tech community, once largely supportive of her stance, was now divided. Some saw her as the defender of democracy, while others felt she was slowing down the very progress that could save the planet. Moore had expected criticism, but what surprised her was the intensity of it. Over the next few days, she received an influx of both praise and disdain. Her inbox was flooded with messages, some thanking her for standing up to the tech giants, others accusing her of being an obstacle to innovation. In a public interview following the announcement, Moore found herself having to defend her position yet again. The interviewer, a tech journalist known for his hard-hitting questions, wasn't pulling any punches. "Ms. Moore, the tech community has spoken. Musk's companies are revolutionizing transportation, energy, and even space exploration. Doesn't your stance risk holding back progress? Shouldn't the law adapt to technology, not the other way around?" Moore smiled, though she could feel the weight of the question pressing down on her. "Progress is important. But it must be progress that benefits all of humanity, not just the elite few. Musk's companies have done incredible things, but the pace at which he's pushing technology isn't sustainable without proper oversight. We need to ensure that the advancements we make don't come at the expense of basic human rights, privacy, or fairness." The journalist raised an eyebrow. "But isn't that the price of progress? Some will be left behind, but the world moves forward, faster and better." Moore's voice softened. "Progress is a double-edged sword. We cannot afford to be reckless. History has shown us the dangers of unchecked power. Our responsibility is to make sure the benefits of technological advancements are distributed fairly. This isn't about slowing down innovation, this is about making sure it serves everyone, not just those who can afford to control it." As the debate raged on between Musk's camp and Moore's supporters, the public was increasingly drawn into the conversation. Social media, always a hotbed of opinions, exploded with commentary. Hashtags like #innovation versus regulation and #Musk versus Moore trended on Twitter for days. People debated the merits of deregulation versus accountability in impassioned posts, and the media continued to amplify these discussions. A new wave of public opinion emerged, with younger generations of tech enthusiasts questioning Musk's approach. Many of them were inspired by his original mission, to change the world, but they were beginning to realize that his unrelenting drive for innovation, without safeguards, might come with consequences they hadn't fully considered. Others felt betrayed by the regulatory compromises, believing that Moore's camp was too cautious and was stifling the very energy and momentum that could have propelled the world into the future faster. Across the political spectrum, support for Musk and Moore had become polarized. Progressive lawmakers praised Moore's victory as a win for public safety, while conservative voices lamented the regulatory restrictions and pushed for greater deregulation. Meanwhile, some of Musk's competitors in the tech world began to take notice of the regulatory decision. For some, it was an opportunity to position themselves as champions of innovation. For others, it was a sign that the game had changed, and they needed to adapt quickly. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon and one of Musk's closest competitors in the space industry, publicly congratulated Musk on his successful lobbying efforts. However, Bezos made it clear that Amazon, too, would be watching closely to see how these new regulations affected the broader tech landscape. "We're all in this together," Bezos said in a statement. "The future is being shaped right now, and we need to make sure we are part of the conversation. Innovation should be encouraged, but so should the need to protect consumers. We'll continue to push for that balance." Other tech giants, like Google and Apple, took a more cautious approach. They had largely remained neutral during the debate, but now that the regulations were becoming clearer, they began to quietly adjust their strategies. Apple, for instance, made a public statement about its commitment to privacy and user protection, signaling that they would be more aligned with Moore's emphasis on regulation and oversight. In the days following the announcement, the sense of an impending shift in the tech world grew even stronger. For Musk, this moment represented both a challenge and an opportunity. He had to recalibrate his strategy, but he knew he could push the boundaries of what was legally acceptable. He wasn't just fighting for innovation, he was fighting for the future of humanity. For Moore, this was a pivotal moment. The victory had been significant, but it was only one step toward ensuring a future where technology would serve the people, not the other way around. She knew that the true test would be in how the recommendations were implemented, and in whether the world could strike the right balance between progress and caution. Elon Musk's character had been shaped by his relentless pursuit of progress, but now he faced the question of how to innovate responsibly within the confines of regulation. His conviction remained unshaken, but his understanding of the complexities of power, responsibility, and ethics had deepened. He was still the visionary disruptor, but now, perhaps for the first time, he was learning to navigate the delicate dance between revolution and restraint. Cassandra Moore, on the other hand, had solidified her role as the moral compass in the storm of technological change. She had always believed that regulation wasn't about stifling innovation, but ensuring that it served the greater good. The battle for the soul of the future was far from over, but Moore had proven that there was still room for responsible, ethical progress in an age of innovation. As the days passed, both Musk and Moore knew that this was only the beginning of a larger, ongoing struggle. The regulatory framework that had been put into place could easily be shifted or overturned, depending on the political climate and public opinion. For now, the world was watching. The question on everyone's mind was, who would control the future? The innovators, or the protectors of society? As Musk and Moore continue to navigate the turbulent waters of technology, law, and public opinion, one thing is certain: the fight for the future has just begun. In the days that followed the announcement of the Regulatory Review Panel's decision, the battle lines were drawn. Musk, while still a prominent figure in the tech world, had lost some of the momentum he had hoped to gain. For Cassandra Moore, however, the victory was far from complete. The real challenge now lay in translating the panel's recommendations into actionable policies. But even as the ink dried on the report, another, more insidious battle was unfolding, one that involved not just Musk and more, but the very heart of the tech industry itself. Elon Musk knew that the regulatory panel's decision would not be the final word. This was only the beginning of a long political process, and he was determined to reshape the path forward. The regulatory framework, though substantial, still allowed room for interpretation. The battle would now shift to Congress, where lobbyists, lawyers, and tech executives would go head-to-head to influence the next round of policymaking. Musk's first move was to court the largest players in the tech industry, companies that, like him, stood to be affected by the new regulations. For years, Silicon Valley had been a world apart from Washington, D.C., where laws were made and enacted. But now, the lines between technology and government were blurring, and the tech moguls knew they needed to be involved if they wanted to control the narrative. Musk held meetings with Amazon's Jeff Bezos, Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, and Google's Sundar Pichai, along with other key figures in the tech industry. They gathered at a luxury hotel in San Francisco, far away from the eyes of the public. This was a war of influence, one that Musk was used to fighting. "We need to reframe the conversation," Musk said as he sat at the head of a large round table, his voice sharp. "What the panel gave us was a foot in the door. If we don't seize this moment, we risk losing the entire decade to bureaucrats who don't understand how the world works. The future will be shaped by technology, and we need to make sure we're at the helm." Bezos nodded. "I agree. But we're talking about more than just regulation here. This is about public perception. If we push too hard, we risk making ourselves the villains." Mark Zuckerberg, ever the pragmatist, chimed in. "Exactly. People are scared of what technology can do, and they're worried about its impact on society. We need to find a way to show that we can innovate responsibly, that we're on the same side as the public." Musk's eyes narrowed. "We don't have time to pander to people's fears. The technology is already here, and it's moving faster than they can regulate it. We have to stay ahead of the game, not wait for permission." The room was quiet as the weight of his words sank in. Musk had always been the most vocal and aggressive advocate for rapid technological progress, but even his allies could see the dangers in his approach. Meanwhile, Cassandra Moore's team was also preparing for the next phase. The regulatory review panel's decision had given her a solid foundation, but she knew the fight was far from over. She had spent years building coalitions, raising public awareness, and pushing for transparency in the tech industry. But now, with the forces of corporate America aligning against her, the struggle would be even more intense. She spent long nights drafting policy proposals that would limit the scope of the tech giant's influence. She worked with lawmakers who shared her concerns, pushing them to introduce legislation that would further restrict the power of large corporations over individuals' data, privacy, and autonomy. At a private meeting with a group of senators, Moore laid out her vision. "The panel has made clear that we can't continue to let big corporations write the rules of the game. We need legislation that ensures transparency, accountability, and fair competition. The people need to know that their data is protected, that their privacy is not a commodity to be sold for profit." One senator, a longtime supporter of Moore's, spoke up. "You've got the right idea, Cassandra, but we're dealing with a different kind of enemy now. These companies are more powerful than ever before. They have the money, the influence, and the networks to push their agenda." Moore's response was firm. "We've been fighting this fight for years. The tech giants think they can buy influence and sway public opinion. But the people are waking up. They're demanding more accountability from these companies, and they're willing to take action." The next few weeks saw intense lobbying and political maneuvering. Musk and his corporate allies put pressure on lawmakers to weaken the regulatory proposals, arguing that too many restrictions would stifle innovation and prevent the U.S. from maintaining its competitive edge in the global tech race. The corporate giants poured millions into political campaigns, hired armies of lobbyists, and launched ad campaigns that painted the regulations as an existential threat to progress. At the same time, Moore and her allies pushed back. They worked tirelessly to counter the corporate narrative, organizing rallies, and using social media to highlight the importance of regulation in maintaining a fair, just society. They emphasized the need for safeguards, transparency, and the protection of individual rights. But despite their efforts, it became increasingly clear that the battle for control over the future was escalating. More and more, the conflict was taking on a familiar shape, one of unchecked power versus the protection of the public good. As the debate continued, public opinion began to shift. What had started as a mostly academic and legal discussion had now turned into a cultural and political battle. People were beginning to feel the weight of technology on their daily lives. Issues like data privacy, social media addiction, and the power of artificial intelligence were no longer distant concerns, they were real problems with tangible effects on people's lives. Polls indicated that while many supported Musk's vision of a technologically advanced future, there was growing concern about the way these companies handled user data and their influence over governments. People were beginning to demand answers about how these technologies were being used and who was really benefiting from them. At a town hall meeting in San Francisco, a group of tech workers voiced their frustrations. "We're working for these companies," one young woman said, "but we don't feel like we have any control over what happens to our work. Musk and Bezos may be visionaries, but they're not the ones who are living with the consequences of their decisions." Moore, who was in attendance, saw the emotional impact that the tech debate was having on the public. It wasn't just about the policy anymore, it was about trust. The companies had a monopoly on progress, but the people were starting to demand a seat at the table. As public sentiment grew more hostile toward tech giants, Musk found himself on the defensive. His outspoken persona, which had once made him a hero to many, was now being seen by some as arrogant, out of touch with the needs of everyday people. The backlash reached a crescendo when an investigative journalist uncovered details about the level of surveillance that Tesla's self-driving cars were conducting on the road. While the data collected was meant to improve the technology, the revelations about how much personal information was being gathered without consent caused a public outcry. Musk attempted to defend his company, arguing that the data was necessary for the advancement of autonomous driving technology and that the benefits outweighed the risks. But the damage had been done. More and more people began to question whether Musk's passion for progress had blinded him to the real concerns of privacy and ethics. For Moore, this was an opportunity. The public had spoken, and the cracks in the tech industry's armor were becoming more visible. She knew that the next few months would be crucial in shaping the future of technology and regulation. Moore launched a new campaign aimed at mobilizing public support for stronger regulations. Her team worked with grassroots organizations to organize protests, educational events, and lobbying efforts. The narrative was clear: it wasn't about stopping progress, it was about making sure that progress was for everyone, not just a select few. "Technology has the potential to change the world," Moore said in a public statement, "but we cannot let it become the tool of oppression. We must ensure that innovation benefits society as a whole, not just the corporations that profit from it." Elon Musk's character had been defined by his ability to push boundaries, but now he was grappling with the consequences of his actions. The tension between his drive for technological progress and the ethical implications of that progress was beginning to show. For the first time, Musk's narrative was being questioned, not just by his critics, but by those who had once admired him. Cassandra Moore, meanwhile, had found herself at the center of a growing movement. Her passion for regulation and fairness had resonated with the public, and she had become the voice of reason in the storm of technological disruption. But Moore knew that this was just the beginning. The real fight for the future of technology was yet to come. As the battle between Musk and Moore escalated, it was clear that the future of technology would not be determined by any one person or company. The stakes were higher than ever, and the next phase of this war would shape the world for generations to come. With the tech giants aligning against regulation and the public growing increasingly vocal about their concerns, Musk and Moore now faced the most challenging fight of all, winning over the hearts and minds of the people. The tension between the tech giants and the regulatory forces was reaching a boiling point. On one side, Elon Musk and his allies pushed forward with their vision of an unconstrained technological future, arguing that innovation could not be held back by cumbersome regulations. On the other side, Cassandra Moore and her supporters called for increased oversight and accountability, emphasizing that society needed to be protected from the unchecked power of corporations. The next few months would prove to be the tipping point for both sides. The fight for control of the future was no longer confined to boardrooms and legislative halls, it was spilling out into the streets, into social media feeds, and into the homes of everyday citizens. The world was watching, and the outcome was far from certain. The battle over regulation entered its most intense phase when the U.S. Senate scheduled a series of public hearings to review the recommendations of the regulatory panel. These hearings would serve as the next step in the political process, where lawmakers would decide whether to implement the proposed regulations or modify them further. For Musk, this was a crucial moment. The hearings would provide him with an opportunity to defend his vision in front of a national audience, while also giving him a platform to sway public opinion. He had spent weeks preparing for the hearings, assembling a team of high-powered lawyers, lobbyists, and public relations experts to ensure that his message would be heard loud and clear. Moore, too, was preparing for the hearings, but her strategy was different. She knew that the public had become increasingly distrustful of the tech giants, and she intended to use this to her advantage. Rather than engage in a back-and-forth over technicalities, Moore aimed to frame the conversation in terms of ethical responsibility in public welfare. She wanted the hearings to focus on the larger societal implications of unchecked technological power. The day of the hearings arrived, and the media coverage was unprecedented. The world was watching as Musk and Moore, two of the most influential figures in the tech world, would face off in a public showdown. Elon Musk was the first to testify. He walked into the hearing room with his usual confidence, his eyes sharp and focused. He knew that this was a make-or-break moment for his vision of the future. His opening statement was a direct challenge to the regulatory panel's recommendations. "Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate," Musk began, his voice calm but powerful, "I stand before you today not just as the CEO of a company, but as a visionary. Our world is changing faster than ever, and we cannot afford to be held back by outdated regulations. If we want to stay competitive on the world stage, if we want to continue making the kinds of breakthroughs that will define the next century, we must be bold. We must embrace innovation without fear." Musk leaned forward, his tone becoming more impassioned. "The recommendations before you represent a step backward. They represent a fear of progress, a fear of what we can achieve. These regulations will slow down the very innovations that will solve the world's biggest problems: climate change, energy shortages, and transportation inefficiencies. We cannot let fear dictate our future." His words were calculated to strike a chord with lawmakers and the public. Musk framed himself not as a businessman seeking to avoid regulation, but as a champion of progress, someone willing to take risks for the greater good. "Technology is advancing at an unprecedented rate," Musk continued. "To ensure that we remain leaders in this new era, we need to embrace that change. Yes, there will be risks. But without risk, there can be no reward. If we don't push forward, we risk falling behind, not just as a company, but as a nation." Cassandra Moore's opening statement was a stark contrast to Musk's. She took the podium calmly, her posture straight and poised. She had spent years preparing for this moment, and she knew that it was not just her words, but her principles, that would need to shine through. "Senators, esteemed colleagues, and citizens of this great nation," Moore began, her voice steady, "we are here today to discuss the future of our society, a future shaped by the technologies we create. But the question we must ask ourselves is, what kind of future do we want to build? A future where progress is unchecked, or one where innovation is balanced with responsibility?" Moore paused for a moment, allowing her words to sink in. "We stand at a crossroads. The technology being developed by the companies before you today has the potential to change the world for the better. But with that power comes a responsibility. A responsibility to ensure that the benefits of progress are not concentrated in the hands of a few, but shared by all. A responsibility to ensure that the technologies we create do not harm individuals, exploit personal data, or violate privacy. Moore's words were calculated to appeal to the growing concerns of the public. She painted a picture of a future where technology could be harnessed for good, but only if it was held accountable to the people it was meant to serve. We cannot allow these companies to operate with impunity. We must hold them accountable. We must create laws that protect the rights of every citizen. This is not just about regulation, it is about the kind of society we want to live in. We must ensure that the technological revolution benefits everyone, not just the few who control it. As the hearings progressed, the public response became increasingly divided. On one hand, there were those who supported Musk's vision, seeing him as a forward-thinking leader who was pushing humanity toward a brighter future. On the other hand, there were those who saw Musk as a billionaire tech mogul with too much power and not enough accountability. Social media exploded with opinions. Hashtags like #InnovationForAll and #TechForPeople dominated Twitter and other platforms. Some users rallied behind Musk, praising his boldness and vision, while others rallied behind Moore, emphasizing the need for regulation and ethical oversight. Public demonstrations also began to take place in major cities. Supporters of Moore organized protests demanding stricter regulations on tech companies, while Musk supporters staged counter-protests, arguing that overregulation would kill innovation. One of the most vocal advocates for Musk's approach was a well-known tech entrepreneur, Sarah Patel, who had built a successful AI startup from the ground up. She posted a video on social media calling for deregulation. Regulations are necessary to prevent monopolies, yes, Patel said in the video. But when we create rules that prevent innovation, we create a future where we're left behind. The world is changing, and the US needs to stay ahead. Musk is doing the right thing. We need to keep pushing the boundaries, not restrict them. On the other side, a group of former tech industry insiders, many of whom had worked at companies like Google and Facebook, issued a statement backing Moore's call for oversight. Their collective voice added weight to the growing movement for responsible innovation. As the hearings drew to a close, it was clear that both Musk and Moore had presented compelling cases. The Senate committee would now deliberate on the next steps. Would they push forward with the proposed regulatory framework, or would they yield to the pressure of the tech giants and their powerful lobbying forces? Behind closed doors, the real work began. Senators met with lobbyists, read through countless reports, and weighed the public outcry. The decision would not be made overnight, but everyone knew that it would have far-reaching consequences. For Musk, the hearings had been a chance to galvanize his supporters and remind the world of the necessity of rapid technological advancement. But he knew that this was just the beginning. The fight for the future was far from over. For Moore, the hearings had been an opportunity to put the public's concerns at the forefront of the conversation. She had successfully framed the debate as one of ethics and public welfare. But she also knew that the real work would begin after the hearings concluded, fighting to ensure that the recommendations were not watered down, that the protections put in place would be enforced. Musk's character had evolved over the course of the hearings. While he still clung to his belief in the power of unbridled innovation, he had become more aware of the increasing scrutiny that tech companies were under. His conviction remained strong, but he had learned that in this battle, optics and public perception were just as important as technological breakthroughs. Moore, too, had grown stronger. Her passion for regulation and accountability had resonated with a large portion of the public, but she knew that it was not just about winning an argument, it was about winning the hearts and minds of the people. The future was uncertain, but Moore had proven that a single voice could make a difference in the fight for what was right. The stage was set for a monumental decision, one that would determine the future of technology and regulation. Would Musk's vision of an unfettered future prevail, or would Moore's call for accountability reshape the tech industry forever? With the Senate hearings concluded and the battle lines drawn, the question now remains, who will control the future? The innovators who want to push the limits, or the regulators who want to protect society? The days following the Senate hearings were tense. Both Elon Musk and Cassandra Moore, though they had presented their arguments with clarity and conviction, knew that the outcome of the hearings was only one part of the larger struggle for the future. What followed would determine the path forward, not just for them, but for the entire world. For Musk, the result of the hearings was less important than the narrative he could craft around it. His approach to innovation, to disruption, and to the future of humanity, had been put on display. Now, he would fight not just for his companies, but for his legacy. He could feel the pressure mounting, not only from the regulatory forces that sought to rein him in, but from his own investors, tech colleagues, and the growing global scrutiny. For Moore, the hearings were a key battleground, but the true fight was now taking place in the halls of Congress and behind closed doors with corporate lobbyists. She had won the ideological war for the public, but would the legislators have the backbone to push forward the regulatory measures she had championed? Musk's next move was calculated. With the hearings behind him, he knew it was time to shift from debate to action. He took to social media, flooding his platforms with videos, posts, and live-streamed Q&As that would shape public opinion in his favor. He knew that technology had a unique power to build communities and influence discourse, and he was going to use it to his advantage. Technology doesn't wait for the government to catch up, Musk tweeted to his millions of followers. Innovation doesn't wait for permission. We're in a race, either we lead, or we fall behind. It's as simple as that. He then released a series of videos showcasing Tesla's latest advancements in autonomous driving, SpaceX's new Mars mission plans, and Neuralink's cutting-edge brain-computer interface technology. The videos were designed not just to impress, but to stir excitement. Musk was positioning himself as the champion of a brighter, bolder future, one that was built on the back of rapid technological progress. In a particularly controversial tweet, Musk remarked, "Regulation is the enemy of progress." Look at the history of innovation. Every great leap forward has been met with opposition from those too afraid to change. We must embrace the future. To his supporters, this message was a rallying cry. To his critics, it was a stark warning. Musk was ready to go to war, not just with Moore, but with anyone who stood in his way. He was the embodiment of Silicon Valley's boldest ambitions, and he would not let anything or anyone slow him down. Cassandra Moore, while sympathetic to the regulatory challenges ahead, was not content to sit on the sidelines. She knew that the next few months would decide the future of technology policy in America. She doubled down on her efforts to ensure that the regulatory recommendations would be enacted, and expanded. Moore reached out to a network of senators and representatives, organizing private meetings, drafting proposals, and preparing the ground for intense lobbying. Unlike Musk, she wasn't focused on mass appeal through flashy campaigns or viral tweets. Instead, Moore's approach was one of precision, building alliances with key lawmakers, legal experts, and advocacy groups to ensure that the regulatory framework would become law. She also worked to solidify public support. Moore's team launched an awareness campaign centered on the ethical implications of unfettered technological growth. The slogan, "Technology with Responsibility," became a rallying cry for those who believed that without oversight, society's values and freedoms would be compromised. But it wasn't just about policy. Moore knew that, much like Musk, her influence would need to extend beyond the political realm into the hearts of the public. She made a deliberate effort to speak to people directly, through social media, interviews, and town halls. In one notable town hall in Denver, Moore spoke passionately about the need for transparency in how tech companies collected data and used artificial intelligence. "It's not about stopping progress," she said, "it's about making sure that we don't build a future where the few control everything, where technology serves the interests of a select group rather than benefiting society as a whole." The turnout at these events was growing, with large groups of young professionals, parents, tech workers, and concerned citizens attending to hear Moore's message. As the momentum built, it became clear that Moore wasn't just fighting for regulations, she was fighting for a cultural shift, one where people took control of their own data and rights. While Musk and Moore were fighting on the public stage, behind the scenes, the battle was far more insidious. Lobbyists and corporate giants like Amazon, Google, and Facebook were using their considerable resources to influence lawmakers. It wasn't just about policy anymore, it was about money, power, and influence. Musk's allies in the tech world ramped up their lobbying efforts. They were pouring millions into the coffers of key senators and representatives who held sway over the decisions that would shape the tech landscape. Musk himself met with influential lawmakers, offering his vision of an unregulated future where America would dominate the global tech race. At the same time, Moore's team was up against some of the most powerful corporate forces in the world. But Moore wasn't alone in her fight. She had the backing of a coalition of smaller tech companies, privacy advocates, and labor unions that saw the importance of creating a fairer, more transparent system. Together, they launched a multi-pronged lobbying campaign aimed at pushing for stricter regulations on data privacy, AI transparency, and corporate accountability. The battle over tech policy had become a full-fledged war, with every inch gained or lost depending on the ability to influence key lawmakers and sway public opinion. Each side had its advantages. Musk had the resources, charisma, and the power of innovation on his side, while Moore had the moral high ground, the public support, and a growing grassroots movement. As the battle in Washington intensified, public opinion was continuing to shift. For many, the hearings had brought into sharp focus the dangers of an unchecked tech industry. Musk's vision of rapid technological progress was exciting, but it was also seen by many as dangerous without the proper safeguards in place. An increasing number of Americans were becoming concerned about their privacy. The revelations of surveillance programs, combined with stories of data misuse, were making it clear that the personal information of everyday citizens was being treated as a commodity. The public wanted answers, and they wanted action. Moore's message was resonating. People were organizing. Town halls were becoming packed with concerned citizens. Protests were being planned. In New York, an enormous rally took place in Central Park, where thousands gathered to voice their support for stronger tech regulations. Signs reading, "Protect our privacy," and "Innovation should serve people," were held high in the air. At the same time, social media was ablaze with debates over the future of technology. Hashtags like #TechForGood and #RegulateBigTech trended nationwide. People were not just talking about it, they were demanding change. It became clear that the public had become an unstoppable force in this debate. The power of the people was something that Musk and his allies could no longer ignore. As the final votes on tech regulation approached, the tension in Washington was palpable. The fate of the tech industry, and the future of how it would be governed, would soon be decided. Would Congress side with Musk and the tech giants, allowing the industry to continue its rapid, unregulated growth? Or would they listen to Moore and the growing public outcry, implementing regulations that would rein in the power of corporations and protect the rights of individuals? The next few weeks would determine it all. Elon Musk had grown more entrenched in his stance on innovation and progress. The idea of being constrained by regulations was anathema to him. He saw himself as a revolutionary, pushing the boundaries of what was possible, and he would fight with everything he had to make sure his vision of the future became a reality. Cassandra Moore, on the other hand, had become not just a politician, but a symbol of resistance against corporate power. She had built a coalition of diverse voices, tech workers, privacy advocates, everyday citizens, and her resolve was unshakable. She believed in the possibility of a future where technology served people, not the other way around. The final decision was fast approaching. Musk and Moore were at the height of their power, each ready to claim victory. But in the world of politics and corporate power, nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. What would the future hold? As the fate of tech regulation hangs in the balance, the question remains, will the public win the battle for a fair future, or will the tech giants emerge victorious, unchallenged and unbound? What do you think? Should we trust the tech giants to regulate themselves, or is it time for stricter laws to ensure the public's rights are protected? Let us know in the comments. As the final votes in Congress loomed, the pressure on both sides reached a breaking point. The media coverage was intense, the protests were growing larger, and the lobbyists were working overtime. Behind the scenes, both Elon Musk and Cassandra Moore were preparing for the moment that could change the future of the tech industry forever. The battle was no longer just ideological, it had become a test of endurance, of strategy, and of power. Musk's belief in the future of technological innovation without restraint was being met with Moore's call for accountability, for the protection of personal rights, and for a future where technology worked for people, not against them. Both sides had their champions, but the fate of the entire industry rested in the hands of a few hundred legislators in Washington, D.C. Elon Musk, ever the strategist, knew this was his last chance to secure his vision of an unregulated technological future. He had been relentless in his lobbying efforts, leveraging the influence of Tesla, SpaceX, and his growing global empire. But now, it was time to go all in. He called an emergency press conference, flanked by a team of powerful business leaders, engineers, and advocates who supported his vision. His goal was simple: rally the country, sway the public, and pressure Congress into making the right decision. Today, I stand before you not just as the CEO of a company, Musk began, his voice calm but forceful. I stand before you as someone who believes in the future of humanity. And that future will not be shaped by fear or regulation, it will be shaped by the boldness of visionaries willing to take risks for the betterment of all. Musk's words struck at the heart of America's entrepreneurial spirit. His rhetoric painted a picture of a world where the United States could remain the undisputed leader in innovation, where progress would not be stifled by bureaucratic red tape. He promised that if Congress gave tech companies the freedom to innovate without constraint, they would deliver solutions to climate change, space exploration, and energy independence. If we're going to overcome the challenges of the next century, we need to be able to move fast, Musk continued. We cannot afford to wait for regulators to catch up. If we do, we will fall behind, not just as a country, but as a species. We need to act now, and we need to act boldly. The press conference was broadcast live across the country, and his words struck a chord with many. The hashtag #UnleashInnovation trended within hours, and social media was flooded with messages of support. Musk's followers, many of whom were tech enthusiasts, young entrepreneurs, and futurists, rallied behind him. Yet, for every supporter Musk gained, Moore's camp grew just as resolute. The battle was not over, and the outcome was still uncertain. Cassandra Moore was not about to let Musk's rhetoric dominate the conversation. Her response was swift, deliberate, and precise. She issued a statement in response to Musk's press conference, challenging his claims head-on. Musk's vision of a future without regulation is nothing more than a dystopian fantasy, Moore said in a press release. Innovation is not an excuse for exploitation. We cannot allow unchecked corporations to control the future of our society. We need to build a future where technology works for all people, not just the few at the top. She didn't stop there. Moore's team, in partnership with grassroots organizations, launched a series of new ad campaigns targeting key swing districts in Congress. The ads featured stories of ordinary Americans who had suffered due to the unchecked power of tech companies, workers whose jobs had been replaced by AI, families whose personal data had been sold without consent, and individuals whose privacy had been violated. The ads were powerful and emotional. One ad showed a mother, holding her child, speaking directly to the camera, "I don't want my kids growing up in a world where their every move is tracked by a corporation. We need regulation to protect their future." Moore's message was clear: it wasn't just about policy, it was about the future of society. This was about ensuring that technology served the public good, not corporate greed. Technology is a tool, Moore said in her speeches. But like any tool, it can be used for good or for harm. And without the proper safeguards, it will be used to exploit people, to manipulate their data, and to control their lives. The ads quickly went viral, and Moore's supporters were emboldened. Protests grew in size, with massive demonstrations taking place outside the Capitol. It became clear that Moore's movement was gaining traction, fast. As the days counted down to the vote, both sides intensified their efforts. Musk was pulling out all the stops, using his media empire to pressure lawmakers into siding with him. At the same time, Moore was building a formidable coalition, calling in favors and mobilizing the public to hold Congress accountable. The media was abuzz with speculation about the outcome. Could Congress hold firm against the growing tide of corporate power, or would they buckle under the pressure of big tech lobbying? Behind closed doors, the lobbying efforts were reaching their peak. Musk's team was flooding Washington with influential voices, offering promises of jobs, innovation, and global dominance in exchange for deregulation. Meanwhile, Moore's team was working tirelessly to counterbalance this pressure, reminding lawmakers of the importance of protecting the rights of everyday citizens. The votes were expected to be close. Some key swing senators, especially those from tech-heavy districts, were still undecided. Would they listen to Musk's promise of a bright future filled with technological marvels, or would they heed Moore's warning of a society dominated by the interests of the few? Elon Musk had become more than just a businessman, he was a symbol of Silicon Valley's ambition, a man whose vision of the future had captured the imaginations of millions. But as the pressure mounted, it was clear that Musk was not just fighting for the future of his companies, he was fighting for his legacy. The stakes had never been higher. Cassandra Moore, on the other hand, had emerged as a political powerhouse. What had begun as a fight for regulation had become a fight for the soul of America's future. Moore had become the face of accountability and responsibility in an age of technological chaos. She was now leading a movement, not just of people who agreed with her policies, but of those who believed that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. Both were, in their own ways, fighting for a vision of the future. But the future was no longer a distant dream, it was about to be decided. The final vote was upon them. A decision would be made that would shape the tech industry for generations to come. And as Musk and Moore prepared for the final showdown, one question remained. Who would win? As the countdown to the vote reaches its climax, one question dominates the conversation: will Congress choose the vision of innovation without boundaries, or will they stand with the people and regulate the tech giants for the future of society? The final day had arrived. The air in Washington was thick with anticipation, and the streets outside the Capitol were swarming with protesters, lobbyists, journalists, and onlookers. The fate of the tech industry, and the future of how technology would be governed in America, would be decided in the next 24 hours. The tension was palpable. Inside the Capitol, the members of Congress were making their final preparations. Both sides, Musk's corporate-backed lobbyists and Moore's grassroots supporters, had mobilized all their resources. It was now a waiting game. Who would win the battle of persuasion, and who would be left to pick up the pieces of a future defined by the decision made on this day? Musk knew that time was running out. Despite all his media campaigns, the rallies, and the promises of technological breakthroughs, there were still undecided lawmakers on the fence. He needed to make one final push to sway them. Early that morning, Musk released a new statement, one that would captivate both his supporters and critics. In the statement, he framed the decision before Congress as not just a policy vote, but a referendum on the future of humanity itself. Today is the day we decide what kind of future we want. We can embrace the future and the technological revolution that will solve our biggest problems: climate change, energy crisis, and the need for space exploration. Or we can choose stagnation. We can choose regulation that will hinder progress and force us to fall behind other nations. Innovation waits for no one. Let's not be the generation that chose to hold back the future. This message resonated with many of Musk's supporters, who saw him as the embodiment of progress and forward thinking. However, it also sparked a fierce backlash from Moore's camp. The message of unstoppable progress without regulation felt like an invitation for exploitation to those who believed that tech companies had too much unchecked power already. As the day wore on, Musk intensified his media blitz, taking to Twitter, Instagram, and even his new social media platform, X, to push his message directly to the people. His tweets were direct and combative, each one designed to put pressure on Congress. Tech is the future. Congress, don't be the bottleneck, he tweeted. We can lead the world in innovation or fall behind. The choice is yours. Cassandra Moore had been preparing for this moment for months. The rallies, the town halls, the countless meetings with lawmakers, it had all led to this one final push. She knew that the decision Congress was about to make would echo for years, even decades. She was determined to ensure that the voice of the people would be heard. At a press conference that afternoon, Moore stood firm and resolute. This isn't just about regulation, Moore said, her voice steady but filled with conviction. This is about protecting the values that make us who we are, freedom, privacy, and the right to control our own data. The future can be bright, but it must be a future that serves everyone, not just the richest corporations. We cannot allow a few tech giants to decide how our lives are lived. That is not freedom, it's control. Her words were punctuated by a wave of applause from the crowd that had gathered to hear her speak. It was clear that Moore was not just advocating for policy change, she was leading a movement that saw technology as something to be guided, not something to be unleashed without boundaries. History has shown us what happens when power is unchecked, Moore continued. We've seen it in monopolies, in corporations that dominate every aspect of our lives. We've seen it in data misuse, in surveillance, in the erosion of privacy. Do we really want to hand the reins of our future to those who will put profit over people? Her speech ignited a firestorm on social media, sparking more protests and amplifying her base's message. It was clear that Moore was fighting not just for legislation, but for a future in which technology served the people, not the other way around. As the day drew to a close, the Capitol was abuzz with frantic activity. Lawmakers who had been wavering were now facing intense pressure from both sides. The corporate lobbyists working for Musk's interests had pulled out all the stops, private jets, lavish dinners, and behind-the-scenes deals designed to secure the votes needed to pass the deregulation bill. On the other side, Moore's allies were working just as hard. They had flooded Congress with letters, phone calls, and emails from constituents. Advocacy groups were organizing final marches, and the media was keeping a steady spotlight on the issue. There were no stone left unturned. Musk's strategy had been one of power and persuasion, appeal to the lawmakers' ambition, their desire for economic growth, and the promise of a future where America remained the global leader in technological innovation. Moore, in contrast, was fighting with the power of the people. She was showing Congress that they had a moral obligation to protect the rights of the public, especially when it came to the growing influence of tech giants. It was time. The Capitol doors swung open as the final vote was called. Musk's supporters were hopeful, their faith in his vision of the future unwavering. Moore's supporters were on edge, knowing that this vote was their last chance to secure a future that was not dominated by corporations. The outcome of the vote would be a reflection of how America viewed its relationship with technology, as a tool to be used freely, or as a powerful force that needed to be reined in for the good of all. As the votes were cast, it was clear that this was not a simple decision. Some lawmakers stood firm with Musk, advocating for the future of unregulated innovation. Others stood with Moore, demanding that tech companies be held accountable. The final tally came in slowly, but the atmosphere in the room was electric. As the last votes were counted, it was clear that the result would be razor-thin. In this chapter, Musk's character had fully transformed from a tech mogul into a messianic figure, leading the charge for a future shaped by unbridled innovation. His personal belief in the importance of technology, and his unshakable commitment to progress, had turned him into a symbol of Silicon Valley's unrelenting ambition. His fight was no longer just about his companies, it was about his vision for humanity itself. Cassandra Moore, on the other hand, had become the face of a movement that sought to balance progress with responsibility. Her character had evolved from a policymaker to a crusader, someone who understood that the future of society depended not just on what technology could achieve, but on how it was used. She had become a champion of the people, someone who believed in the transformative power of technology when it was kept in check. The vote was nearing its conclusion. The final decision on the fate of tech regulation was about to unfold. The next few moments would reveal the future of technology, and whether Musk or Moore would ultimately shape the direction of the industry. The vote was done. The fate of tech regulation had been decided. But who emerged victorious in this high-stakes battle, and what would the future hold for America's relationship with technology? The air was thick with tension as the final votes were counted. The Capitol was silent, save for the murmurs of reporters, lobbyists, and lawmakers who were waiting for the official tally. The fate of the tech industry and the future of how technology would be governed had been decided in those few seconds. The result was close, agonizingly close. As the Speaker of the House announced the final count, a collective gasp rippled through the room. It was a victory for Cassandra Moore. By a narrow margin, Congress had voted in favor of regulation, choosing to place checks on the power of the tech giants. The bill passed, this time, with amendments that required greater oversight, stricter privacy laws, and accountability for how tech companies could use people's data. Musk's camp was stunned. After months of relentless campaigning, lobbying, and media pressure, the vote had not gone in their favor. Musk had been confident, but the tide had turned. The political battle had been lost, but the war was far from over. For Moore, it was a triumph of people power. Her movement had mobilized tens of thousands of citizens, galvanized by the fear that the unchecked power of corporations could lead to a loss of freedom and privacy. It was a victory for those who believed that technology should work for people, not profit alone. Elon Musk stood at the front of the room, his expression one of disbelief. He had anticipated this moment for weeks, but even he could not have prepared for the blow. It wasn't just the loss of the vote, it was the loss of a vision. Musk had always believed that technology could solve humanity's greatest problems, that if left unregulated, innovation would push society into a new age of prosperity. Now, that future seemed more uncertain than ever. While I respect the democratic process, I must say that today's vote is a setback for progress, Musk said in his first public statement after the vote. His voice was calm, but his words were sharp, filled with an undercurrent of frustration. Regulation does not solve problems. It delays them. We should be focused on what technology can achieve, not bogging it down with unnecessary barriers. Musk's team quickly mobilized to find a new path forward. With the regulatory restrictions now set in stone, Musk was determined to adapt. The fight was far from over. He knew that the next stage would be an uphill battle, fighting not only with the government but also against the growing backlash from people who now believed that his vision had been too bold, too dangerous. Cassandra Moore, on the other hand, was surrounded by her team of supporters and advocates. There were tears, cheers, and hugs as the victory settled in. For Moore, this was more than a legislative win. It was a cultural shift, a victory for the idea that people could reclaim their power in a world where technology seemed to control every aspect of their lives. This is only the beginning, Moore said, addressing her supporters in front of the Capitol. Today, we showed that the people's voice matters. We showed that when we come together, we can make a difference. This bill is a step forward, but we have a lot of work left to do. We need to ensure that tech works for all of us, not just the elite few. Her words resonated with the crowd, who had been tirelessly advocating for months. For many, it felt like a victory not just against Musk, but against an industry that had long been unchallenged in its power. But Moore knew that the fight wasn't over. Passing the bill was just one step. The real work would begin once the regulations were in place. How would tech companies respond? Would they comply, or fight back? What would be the true impact on innovation and the economy? The media was abuzz with reports, interviews, and analysis. News outlets across the country debated the implications of the vote. On one side, proponents of deregulation argued that the move could stifle innovation, while on the other, advocates for regulation celebrated the victory as a necessary step in ensuring that the tech giants did not get too powerful. The tech industry just lost its biggest battle, one analyst on a major news network said. Elon Musk's vision for an unregulated future is over, at least for now. But this isn't the end of the story. What happens next will define the future of the entire tech industry. Musk's supporters were not backing down. They were already planning their next steps, both legally and politically. If they could not get Congress to lift the regulations, they would work to reverse the laws through litigation, or perhaps even by finding ways to influence public opinion again. It was clear that Musk had no intention of abandoning his vision. Despite the blow, Musk was already plotting his next move. Over the next few days, he made a series of high-profile statements, acknowledging the defeat but reiterating his commitment to pushing the boundaries of technological progress. He had always been the type to bounce back from setbacks, and this time was no different. The road ahead is more challenging than ever, Musk said in an exclusive interview. But we are not done. We will find new ways to innovate, to bring about the changes this world desperately needs. Regulations may slow us down, but they will not stop us. Musk's response was a reminder that his ambition was not easily contained. He had always been a disruptor, and now, in the wake of this defeat, he was preparing for the next phase of the battle, one that would likely involve legal challenges, public campaigns, and perhaps even more aggressive lobbying. On the other side, Cassandra Moore knew that passing the bill was only half the battle. She had won the fight in Congress, but now she had to ensure that the regulations were enforced and that the tech industry didn't find ways to undermine them. Winning is important, Moore said in a strategy meeting with her team. But we cannot rest. We need to stay vigilant. These companies will fight tooth and nail to protect their profits. We must keep pushing for transparency, accountability, and fairness. Moore's victory had energized her supporters, but she also knew that the true challenge was just beginning. How would tech companies adapt to the new regulations? Would they comply, or would they find ways to skirt the laws? How would the rest of the world respond to America's newfound stance on tech regulation? In this chapter, both Musk and Moore's characters continue to evolve. Musk, though defeated in this particular battle, was still as determined as ever. He had faced setbacks before, and he would face more in the future. But his belief in the power of technology and his role in shaping the future remained unwavering. Moore, in contrast, had grown into a more measured and focused leader. While her victory was a personal triumph, she understood that the real work was just beginning. She was no longer just a politician, she had become the face of a movement, and the pressure on her to ensure the successful implementation of the new regulations was immense. The battle over tech regulation was far from over. With Musk's determination to find a way around the new laws and Moore's commitment to ensuring that the regulations were enforced, the stage was set for a new kind of war, one that would continue to shape the future of technology for years to come. As the dust settled from the vote, the battle for the future of technology had only just begun. Would Musk find a way to bypass the regulations? Or would Moore and her supporters successfully keep tech in check for the benefit of all? The shock of the vote's outcome had barely settled and the first legal challenges began to surface. Elon Musk was not one to accept defeat quietly. While some of his supporters in the business world were disappointed by the result, Musk had already begun working on his next move, a full-scale legal assault on the new regulations. Within days of the vote, Musk's legal team filed an injunction to block the implementation of the new regulatory measures. The suit argued that the new regulations were unconstitutional, violating the principles of free enterprise and stifling innovation. Musk, ever the visionary, believed that these regulations could cause lasting harm to the very companies that had the potential to drive humanity forward. The regulation of technology is a step backward, Musk declared in a press statement following the legal filing. This is a government overreach that will only harm innovation and economic growth. We will fight this with everything we have, and we will win. His legal team was already working around the clock. The litigation strategy was twofold: first, to delay the implementation of the regulations with court orders, and second, to challenge the law's core components as unconstitutional. Musk had always been one to take risks, and this was no different. By making such a bold move, he was sending a clear message that the battle for the future was far from over. On the other side of the battlefield, Cassandra Moore was bracing for the inevitable. She had anticipated that Musk would not go down without a fight, but she had hoped he might take a more measured approach. Instead, he had gone for a full-scale attack, seeking to undermine the new laws before they could even take effect. Moore held a press conference to respond, her voice calm but resolute. Elon Musk's decision to challenge the law in court is not surprising, she said. He's always been about power, control, and bending the system to his will. But this is bigger than one man. This is about ensuring that our technological future serves the people, not just the few who control the wealth and data. We will stand firm and defend the law. Her words were backed by a growing coalition of legal experts, privacy advocates, and grassroots organizations that had rallied behind her cause. Moore knew that the legal battle would be long, but she was prepared for it. The key, she believed, was to keep the public engaged, to remind them why this fight was so important. The media frenzy surrounding the legal battle was immediate and all-consuming. News outlets were saturated with stories about Musk's legal challenges and the implications of his fight against the new regulations. On one side, Musk supporters argued that the regulations would crush the innovative spirit that had made America a global leader in technology. On the other, Moore's supporters hailed the legal challenge as proof of Musk's refusal to be held accountable for his company's actions. Analysts and commentators were quick to weigh in. Some predicted that Musk's legal team would eventually succeed in overturning the regulations. Others, however, believed that the case would be drawn out for years, delaying the regulatory changes but not necessarily reversing them. The battle, it seemed, had entered a new phase, one that would be fought in the courts, not just in the halls of Congress. Musk's legal team was formidable. Comprised of high-powered lawyers and constitutional experts, they launched a multi-pronged strategy to challenge the regulatory bill. They filed petitions, requests for expedited hearings, and motions to delay the enforcement of the regulations until the court could rule on their constitutionality. At the heart of their argument was the claim that the new regulations violated the free market principles enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. Musk's legal team argued that these regulations were overly broad and had the potential to choke off competition and stifle technological progress. The regulations are so sweeping that they will undermine the ability of companies to innovate, argued one of Musk's lead attorneys, a well-known litigator in the tech world. This is not about consumer protection, this is about hampering the future of our nation. As expected, Musk's legal team found support among some corners of the business community. Many small and medium-sized tech companies rallied behind him, arguing that the regulations would create a heavy burden on their operations and give large corporations an unfair advantage. Moore, meanwhile, was already preparing for the long fight ahead. Her legal team had spent the past few days organizing their defense, and they were determined to protect the law at all costs. The fight was no longer just about a single piece of legislation, it was about preserving the integrity of the democratic process and ensuring that technological power remained in the hands of the people. Moore's attorneys had a simple but powerful argument: the government had the right to regulate industries that affected public safety, privacy, and national security. Technology companies, especially those with the level of power Musk wielded, could no longer be treated as untouchable entities. The new regulations were designed not to limit innovation, but to ensure that innovation did not come at the expense of personal freedoms. Our case is clear, Moore's lead attorney stated. These regulations are constitutional, and they are essential for protecting the American people from corporate overreach. This is not about restricting freedom, it's about ensuring that technology serves society, not the other way around. As the legal battle began to heat up, it became clear that the political implications were just as significant. Lawmakers who had voted for the bill were under increasing pressure from Musk's allies to change course. The tech mogul supporters in Congress argued that the regulations would hurt innovation and cost American jobs. In contrast, Moore's supporters pushed back, emphasizing that the new rules were necessary to protect consumers and ensure that tech companies played by the same rules as every other industry. The battle lines were drawn. Both sides were mobilizing their forces for what would likely be a long and grueling legal war. Musk's supporters in Congress were pushing for amendments to weaken the regulations, while Moore's allies were determined to stand their ground and defend the law. This chapter saw both Musk and Moore facing challenges on a new front, the courtroom. Musk, always the disruptor, had turned to the legal system to fight back against the regulatory changes that threatened his vision of the future. His legal challenge was not just about the law, it was about his ability to maintain control over the tech landscape. Moore, on the other hand, was emerging as a seasoned leader, one who knew that the fight was never truly over. She was willing to take on Musk, the legal system, and the business establishment in order to protect what she saw as the most important element of the debate, the rights and freedoms of ordinary people. For Moore, this battle wasn't just about policy, it was about values. As the legal battle unfolded, it was clear that this war would not be decided quickly. Both Musk and Moore were in it for the long haul, and the outcome of this battle would likely shape the future of the tech industry for years to come. The legal war had begun. Would Elon Musk's legal challenges succeed in overturning the new regulations? Or would Cassandra Moore's vision for a more accountable tech industry stand strong in the courts? As the legal battles dragged on, the clash between Elon Musk and Cassandra Moore reached a boiling point. The courtroom was no longer the only stage for the fight, the battle had spilled over into the public consciousness, drawing in people from all walks of life. Both sides were using every tool at their disposal: social media, television interviews, protests, and grassroots campaigns, to influence public opinion. Elon Musk had long been a master of public relations, and now, more than ever, he relied on his media presence to sway public opinion. As the court hearings began, Musk launched a media blitz, speaking directly to the public through interviews, social media posts, and live-streamed events. "We are witnessing a dangerous precedent," Musk said in a widely watched interview. "This is not about protecting the people, it's about control. When the government can tell private companies what to do, they have crossed a line. This is not the America I believe in. We need to stop this madness before it's too late." Musk's supporters rallied behind his message. On Twitter, forums, and blogs, the hashtag #SaveInnovation began to trend, with millions of followers sharing their thoughts on why the regulations were a threat to technological progress. Musk's message resonated with those who believed that government intervention would stifle creativity, disrupt the economy, and harm the very industries that had given birth to Silicon Valley's success. Many in the business world echoed Musk's sentiments, warning that heavy-handed regulations could have disastrous consequences for small startups and emerging technologies. "The government can't pick winners and losers," one venture capitalist argued in a public statement. "If they can control tech, what's next? Who gets to say what other industries can and cannot do?" The narrative quickly spread. The fight wasn't just about tech companies, it was about freedom, innovation, and the American dream. But Cassandra Moore wasn't sitting idly by. She understood that this battle wasn't just about legislation or technology, it was about shaping the future of society. And for Moore, that meant a future where tech companies could not operate without oversight and accountability. Moore's response was direct and forceful. She didn't just argue that regulation was necessary, she argued that the future of democracy itself depended on it. Through a series of powerful speeches, interviews, and social media posts, she rallied her supporters and urged them to take action. "Technology should serve humanity, not the other way around," Moore said during a speech that went viral. "The reason we're here today is because of unchecked power. No one is above the law, not even the billionaires who think they can control our future. If we don't act now, we risk losing everything we've worked for. Moore's campaign was about more than just stopping Musk, it was about making sure that no one, regardless of their wealth or power, could dictate the future of society without input from the people. It was a call for fairness, accountability, and transparency. Her movement gained traction as millions of citizens joined her cause, signing petitions, attending rallies, and speaking out on social media. The tide of public opinion began to shift as Moore's message found a receptive audience among those who feared that the unchecked growth of the tech industry had already caused irreparable harm to privacy, personal freedom, and democracy itself. Across the nation, the issue took on a life of its own. Grassroots movements sprang up, with volunteers and activists working tirelessly to organize rallies, protests, and social media campaigns. The narrative surrounding Musk and Moore became a cultural flashpoint, one that divided the public into two clear camps, those who believed in the freedom of the market, and those who feared the concentration of power in the hands of a few tech giants. In major cities, protests took place outside the courthouses, with signs reading #Tech for the People and Regulate Big Tech filling the streets. Supporters of Moore's vision marched for better privacy laws, stricter data protection rules, and more transparency in how tech companies operated. In contrast, Musk supporters held their own rallies, with chants of innovation over regulation, and don't let the government take over, ringing out. They argued that the government was overstepping its bounds and that the regulations would kill innovation and push the US to the backseat of the global tech race. As the public campaign intensified, social media platforms became battlegrounds for both sides. Musk's Twitter feed, long a source of controversy and debate, became the focal point of the tech industry's pushback against regulation. His tweets ranged from sharp critiques of Moore's policies to impassioned pleas for support from his followers. Why does the government want to hold back progress? Musk tweeted one evening. They're afraid of the future. But we won't let them win. On the other side, Moore's campaign was equally visible, though it took a more grassroots approach. Her supporters flooded social media with personal stories about how technology had impacted their lives, both positively and negatively. They shared testimonies of data breaches, privacy invasions, and the manipulative practices of tech giants. They posted about the importance of transparency and accountability in the digital age. Hashtags like #PeopleBeforeProfit and #TechForGood started trending, with Moore herself engaging directly with her followers. Her tone was one of hope, determination, and a call to action. The power is in our hands, Moore tweeted in one of her most widely shared posts. We won't back down. Together, we can reshape the future of tech. While the public battle raged on, the legal landscape was shifting. The courts had already heard the initial arguments from Musk's team, but it would take months, perhaps even years, before a final ruling was reached. In the meantime, Musk was using every available avenue to delay the enforcement of the regulations. He filed motions for a temporary stay, asking for an injunction to keep the law from taking effect while the legal challenges were underway. The courts were now playing a crucial role in determining the future of tech regulation. The judges who would decide the case were under immense pressure from both sides. The case had quickly become a national symbol of the larger struggle between corporate power and governmental oversight. But as the legal wrangling continued, Moore was increasingly focused on the court of public opinion. She knew that no matter how the case turned out in the courts, public support for the regulations was growing. People across the country were beginning to see the importance of holding tech companies accountable, and they weren't going to back down. Elon Musk became even more defined by his resistance to control. His belief in the power of free markets and innovation was now clearly at odds with Moore's vision for a society where technology was held accountable to the people. Musk's defiance was part of his core, he was the embodiment of Silicon Valley's entrepreneurial spirit, but it also made him an adversary to those who felt he had grown too powerful. On the flip side, Cassandra Moore emerged as a more powerful leader, one whose connection to the people was growing stronger by the day. She was no longer just a politician, she was the face of a movement, someone who understood that the future of technology would be shaped not just by regulations, but by the will of the people. As the battle raged on, it was clear that the outcome of the public opinion war would have lasting consequences. Would Musk's message of freedom and innovation resonate with enough people to shift the legal landscape in his favor? Or would Moore's movement, powered by the masses, succeed in cementing a new era of accountability for the tech industry? With public opinion now firmly in play, the battle for the future of technology had become more than just a legal struggle, it had become a cultural war. Who would win the hearts and minds of the people? The courtroom doors were about to close on one of the most significant legal battles in tech history. After months of legal wrangling, public protests, and media campaigns, the endgame had finally arrived. The stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just about Elon Musk versus Cassandra Moore, it was about the very future of how technology would be governed. It was a fight for the soul of Silicon Valley, for the balance of power between corporations and citizens, and for the control of the most powerful forces shaping modern life. The courtroom was packed on the day the final verdict was expected. Reporters, legal experts, tech moguls, and activists filled every seat, anxiously awaiting the judge's ruling. The legal teams for both Musk and Moore were present, their faces a mixture of determination and apprehension. Musk had pushed his legal team to the limit, challenging the very foundations of the new regulations. His defense rested on the claim that they were too broad, too restrictive, and ultimately, unconstitutional. He had put forth an impassioned case that these regulations would cripple the innovation and entrepreneurial spirit that had made America a global leader in technology. His supporters believed this was a last stand for the free market, a fight to keep Silicon Valley's creative energy untethered by government control. On the other side, Moore's legal team had fought just as vigorously. They argued that the regulations were not only constitutional but essential for protecting the public's privacy, security, and rights in an increasingly digital world. They insisted that big tech companies like Musk's could no longer operate with impunity, as their unchecked power threatened the very fabric of society. For Moore, this wasn't just a legal battle, it was a fight for a fairer, more transparent future. The courtroom fell silent as the judge, a seasoned legal mind who had been following the case closely, prepared to deliver the verdict. After careful deliberation, I have reached a decision. The judge's voice was calm, measured, yet filled with gravity. The room leaned in, collectively holding its breath. Both sides have made compelling arguments. The concerns raised about government overreach are valid, as are the fears regarding the unregulated power of tech giants. However, the essence of this case is not about choosing one extreme over the other, but about finding a balance that ensures both innovation and accountability. The judge paused, surveying the room. Musk's legal team exchanged nervous glances, while Moore's supporters held their breath, praying for a favorable outcome. The regulations in question, while not without their flaws, are within the bounds of constitutional authority. They represent a necessary step in addressing the growing influence of the tech industry on public life. However, I also recognize the legitimate concerns raised by the defense regarding the potential stifling of innovation and entrepreneurship. Therefore, the court has ruled to uphold the regulations with certain modifications. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom. The regulations were not being struck down entirely. But they weren't left as they were either. The ruling was a delicate balance, a compromise between the need for regulation and the desire to preserve the entrepreneurial spirit that had fueled the rise of companies like Tesla, SpaceX, and others in Musk's empire. The judge ordered that the regulations would be enforced, but with adjustments that would make them more adaptable to the evolving tech landscape. The court mandated the establishment of a new, independent body, comprising tech experts, policymakers, and public advocates, to oversee and refine the regulations as new challenges emerged in the digital age. This new body would have the power to review existing regulations every few years, ensuring they remained relevant and didn't stifle innovation. It was a win for both sides, albeit a bittersweet one. For Musk, it was a partial victory. The regulations would be enforced, but their implementation would be more flexible, offering him and other tech companies more room to innovate without fear of immediate overreach. He had fought hard for this compromise, and it had paid off. For Moore, the victory was more straightforward. The core of the regulations remained intact, ensuring that tech companies would be held accountable for their actions. The public's privacy, safety, and rights had won out over corporate interests. However, the changes made by the court did leave her with a sense of unfinished business. She knew the fight for a truly fair tech industry was far from over, but this was a significant step in the right direction. The verdict sent shockwaves through the media and the public. Reactions were mixed, as expected. Musk supporters celebrated the ruling as a victory for innovation and the free market. His social media was flooded with praise for his legal team's success and the flexibility granted to tech companies. Many believed that the compromise would allow the tech industry to flourish without the heavy hand of government regulation looming over it. "We won," tweeted one prominent tech investor. "This is a huge win for entrepreneurs and innovators everywhere. Let's keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible." However, Moore's supporters were less enthusiastic. While the core of the regulations remained, the adjustments to the law left many feeling uncertain. Some felt that the court's decision was a setback, as the modifications could potentially weaken the very protections they had fought so hard for. But Moore's campaign wasn't finished yet. "The battle is not over," she told her supporters in a public statement after the verdict. "This is just the beginning. We will continue to push for stronger oversight and accountability. We will never stop fighting for a future where technology works for everyone, not just the powerful few." Her words resonated with millions. While the ruling wasn't a complete victory, it was clear that the fight had already changed the public's perception of tech companies. People were now more aware of the dangers of unchecked corporate power, and Moore's movement had gained a new wave of support. The ruling marked the end of a legal war, but it was only the beginning of a much larger struggle. The new independent body tasked with overseeing tech regulations would play a crucial role in shaping the future of the industry. Would it hold tech giants accountable, or would it become another tool for corporate interests? The next chapter in this saga was already beginning to take shape. For Musk, the compromise meant that he could continue to push the boundaries of technology, but with the understanding that the rules of the game had changed. The days of operating without any oversight were over, but Musk was nothing if not adaptable. He would continue to fight for the future he believed in, but now with an eye on the regulatory landscape. For Moore, the battle was far from won. She knew that tech companies would continue to push back, and that the fight for fairness and transparency would take many more years. But she had won a crucial victory. The public was now paying attention, and the demand for accountability in the tech industry had never been higher. In the aftermath of the ruling, both Musk and Moore had come a long way from the days of simple corporate ambition and political strategy. Musk's idealism and commitment to progress had not wavered, but he had learned that even the most powerful forces could be held in check. He was still the same visionary entrepreneur, but now with a deeper understanding of the legal and political systems that governed his world. Moore, on the other hand, had grown into a formidable political leader, one whose vision for a just and transparent tech world had gained a significant foothold. While the verdict wasn't perfect, it had proven that ordinary citizens, when united, could force even the most powerful players to reconsider their positions. The road ahead was long, but Moore was ready for it. The outcome of the case had far-reaching consequences. It was a victory for both sides in different ways, but more importantly, it was a victory for the future. The battle for tech regulation had sparked a nationwide conversation about the role of government in the digital age and the need for transparency, fairness, and accountability in the tech industry. For the first time in decades, people were starting to question the unchecked power of tech giants. And that was a win in itself. As the ruling was handed down and the dust began to settle, one thing was clear: this battle was just the beginning. The future of technology was still up for grabs. Who would ultimately shape it? The innovators like Musk, or the activists like Moore? Only time would tell. What do you think of the verdict? Did the court make the right decision, or was the compromise a mistake? Will tech regulation become the new normal, or will the next round of battles prove even more intense? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This fight is far from over.